flashing. And in parentheses, because this is also really important, a climb that is near or at maximum limit climbing usually only happens when a special mixture of sequencing, visualization, commitment, smart adaptations, effort, and focus exist.
Tim, my dude, how's it going, man?
Josh, what's up? I feel like it's been a long time since we've podcasted together, just ourselves.
It hasn't been that long. But you were just like booking it. We shoved in those couple of last podcasts because you were heading to Yosemite. You were heading towards Tuolumne. And yeah, dude, I don't know. Let's just start there. Like, because I love Yosemite. Let's talk about Yosemite. You went climbing in Yosemite, the birthplace of rock climbing in the Western U.S. How was it, man?
Yeah.
Did it live up to the hype?
Oh, it was so fun. I mean, it was cool. I think I'll share, I guess, like why I went and the things that we did. But primarily, I just hadn't been to the Sierras in a long time, and I don't really count. Do people count Bishop as the Sierras? Is that?
I mean, we call it the east side because it's on the eastern side of the Sierras. It's interesting to me how mountains start all big up north, and then as they come down, they get like shorter and shorter and shorter. And I mean, it's still taller over in Bishop, but yeah, when do you lose the mountain range, and when is it no longer the Sierra? When does it become LA? I don't know. It's
it's massive. Thing, yeah, it's huge. Yeah. The whole range is huge.
Okay, so you were in the northern part of the Sierras in Northern California, and it's awesome there. And you went back, and how was it?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of grew up. I think in the beginning of my climbing, I got to go to this area called Tuolumne Meadows, which is like pretty high Sierra. That's north of Yosemite. It's like 10,000 feet elevation for most of the area. Only open in the summer because it's super snowy the rest of the year, and they don't maintain the roads. The store shut. I don't know if you saw this, but the store, there's only one store like in this. I don't know. Basically, from when you leave Vining and start going towards Yosemite Valley, the only store that you'll really run into other than a gas station towards Yosemite, I don't know what the name of it is, but is in Tuolumne Meadows. And that store just completely caved in. The roof had apparently like 50 feet of snow on it.
Oh.
And all the buildings, like there was a couple other buildings that looked like they just totally caved in. So crazy. I mean, I was like, oh, well, now we have to leave every time we want to go get food or whatever. It's pretty wild out there. It's, there's no gas or store in Tuolumne itself, which is why I like it. And it kind of keeps it a lot emptier than the valley. Anyway, I got asked by Black Diamond, who's a big sponsor of Facelift for Yosemite, which is this big cleanup event. I got asked to go for BD it's a 5-day event or 4-day event, I think. And basically I made a trip out of it. I decided to go to Tuolumne with Michaela, my girlfriend, before and camp for a couple of days. We ended up staying in Tuolumne for, I think, 5 nights. Not in Tuolumne, we were camping outside of Tuolumne, but we were in that area for 5 nights. We even decided to go to the valley one of the days to check it out on a rest day. But man, we didn't climb that much. It's really rugged out there. It's really camping. We didn't have a winter camp tent. It was super cold. We didn't sleep much at the nights, but that for me, I think when I was younger and I would go on those trips, I would trip out about like having unideal climbing days and stuff. But honestly, I just enjoyed it. It maybe sounded like I was going to say that it wasn't a great climbing trip, but it was just an awesome trip. Like, because the climbing wasn't the star of the trip, it was so much more enjoyable to just like enjoy the views and like hiking and, going climbing. And it's like, yeah, I mean, if anyone knew me growing up, they'd be like, what? Like, you're doing that stuff for fun?
Yeah, Tim, you're on the wrong podcast, man. We don't talk about, we're not camping. We're just here to climb. I love Tuolumne for the hang too. I gotta say that the hang is way better than the valley in my opinion. Lake Tenaya is just gorgeous. It's just like I don't know what elevation that's at, but 10,000 or something. Mm-hmm. Like just this big freaking lake, and just having a beer by the lake after a day of climbing. That place is just, it's stacked with trad adventures, sport climb. The Tioga Cliff is really cool, and yeah, lots of bouldering, which I'm guessing is what you were up there for. But yeah, I got nothing but love for Tuolumne, and it's kind of sad that one store that's like right in the middle of everything. Like if you don't have food there, I mean, we would camp out near Vining, drive up, and get breakfast there. Because the Mobile, there used to be a really cool gas station down at Leviing that closed and doesn't have food anymore. So yeah, dude, you have to. That makes the whole experience a little more expedition style. But
Yeah. I
yeah,
think the mobile is open again, actually, but the food's probably not as good as it used to be. But what we were doing was we were
legendary
driving
food, legendary.
to, yeah, we were driving to Mammoth. We were also camping in Lee Vining, and instead of going up towards the climbing, we were driving the exact opposite direction for another 20, 30 minutes and then figuring it out. So it's pretty, if you don't have everything set up and, if you don't have a van, essentially, I think you're going to kind of struggle. But we're going to make it a tradition every year, I think. It just was so special for me. It was so fun.
Tim, you don't necessarily need a van. You just need to like have more than just uh probably you had like a blanket and a Camry or something, and you were just like, man, like I can't. It's cold. Like you're at like 10,000. The camping there is usually we would camp at the place called like the 9,000 foot pullout. It's because it's at 9,000 feet, and I don't care what part of summer you're in. It gets cold at 9,000 feet, and then that wind
Yeah.
kind of blows, and it's just I don't know, dude. It's
Dude, we
alpine
had
stuff
a
is kind of legit. Like you get respect for hanging out in those conditions. It's a little brutal.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, usually I'm a little bit like not prepared, but this time we had a full tent. We left it at the campsite for a full week. We had everything in there, lots of blankets. We had a space heater every night on with like propane. Like, I mean, we did it. It was just heinous. Like, it's just heinous no matter what. I feel like if you have a van, you're for sure gonna stay warm. You're for sure gonna have food all the time. And we have one cooler. That it's like the cooler, and we only got food every 2 or 3 days, but still that's not as nice as just like I feel like you can just park, wherever you want to park and like do your thing.
Dude, you
Nah,
just
I
remind
want a
me
van.
the last time I was in Tuolumne was with my buddy Will, or we were with the whole crew, but my buddy Will has a sweet van, and part of that van is a bar. And this guy loves making cocktails, and he has a full bar set up in his van. And so yeah, we were sitting inside the van. It's like these things like you're a climber, you love going outside and camping. And then what boulderers actually do is we were sitting inside my buddy's van drinking really good cocktails. Like it's so not camping. And then I put my crash pad down just in the dirt and pass out. It's just we're totally not. This is like like it's that those memes like what your parents think you do, what your friends think you do, what society thinks you do. And when people think of you as climbing, they think of you as I don't know, maybe like climbing Mount Everest or maybe soloing like Alex Honnold. But the reality is what I just said. It's like the hanging out in a van, having some cocktails after grabbing some small pebbles. But anyways,
Yeah, that was
sounds
my
fun,
point.
dude.
I want a
Yeah.
van and a bar, and I want to be able to do that stuff, Josh.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe a van is nice. You're like, oh no, you don't need a van. I'm like, I want a van. That's the reality. I want a van. Anyway, we did facelift after that. We went to Yosemite, and we ended up getting rained out. This is a long story. I don't want to explain this whole story, but we got to camp in Yosemite instead. BD hooked us up with it was me, Carlo Traversi, and then Nick Barry were the athletes showing up, and then Michaela was there, and then two marketing people from BD joined us. So we had like a one campsite for six of us, which was kind of cozy and tight. And we were in I forgot the name of the campground, but it's one of the campgrounds in Yosemite. I did not realize how crowded those things are, like how tight they pack these campsites. It's insane, dude. Like that's a campsite that I probably would not stay in again. I think it was like Upper Pines. I think it was
Yeah.
Upper
Yeah.
Pines. Man, dude,
I
I
hate
mean,
Upper
there was
Pines. Yeah.
probably like 1,000 people in Upper Pines, and there's like two other big campsites. I mean, campgrounds. I mean, literally 1,000 people were there, probably more, because there's like hundreds of campsites in Upper Pine, and each campsite has like in between 3 and 10 people. Like, there's so many people there. But anyway, we had the campsite, which was nice of BD to hook us up. And then the first day we got to go with the Rangers to do a technical cleanup. So everybody goes, who goes to Facelift will just basically check in at the place where everyone meets up, grabs a trash bag or, a potato sack, an empty potato sack, and then you go out for the day and they give you like a claw thing to pick up trash. You pick up all your trash and you come back and you just go to whatever area you want. There are specific areas that are closed in Yosemite for either technical cleanups or, just trail building or whatever. So we got to go to this place called Vernal Falls, which was awesome. There's a little reel that BD made about it. If you guys haven't seen it, you should go check it out. It's actually a really cool event. Apparently at the talk, Ken Yeager, who started Facelift said that they've picked up over like 1 million pounds of trash since they started, which
Wow.
is
Hell
insane.
yeah.
In Yosemite, and we picked up 10,000 pounds of trash just on the couple days that we were there. And I didn't even stay the whole time because we went to Vernal Falls, and I mean it was perfect forecast every day, like I don't know, mid 70s every day in Yosemite. Sun, didn't see any clouds. And on our way out, we basically just got caught in the rain, and the rain was just a downpour. It was super, super big rain, and our tent was not. It was just a summer tent, and we knew that we probably wouldn't be able to hang. We showed up to Upper Pines, and like the first tent we saw was in the water. Like there was like water above the bottom of the tent. We're like, oh man, our tent's gonna be totally hosed. So we drove over to our thing, and it looked fine. Anyway, we ended up opening the door. It looked fine, but then by the time we came back and looked, we lifted our air mattress up, and it was just soaked underneath the air mattress. And we carpooled everybody in our car, and so we put all our stuff that we had for like a 2 week long trip in our tent, and a lot of the stuff got soaked. So we decided to pack it up and just go. And because we have a tent, it's just hard. It's hard to dry things off, like especially if it's not going to be hot. And it just seemed horrible. So we
Dude,
just decided to
you
leave.
need a van. You needed
You
a
need a
van.
van.
That's why. Dude, just Upper Pines and those campsites. Again, it's like that thing. Oh, you're going to Yosemite. It's gonna be so cool, and you're in nature. And then you know what Upper Pines is like. It's you are trying to go to sleep while just some giant family is just loud making s'mores, and you're like, I gotta get up and send early and get those temps. And then you wake up to a big RV generator just right outside your freaking door at 6 in the morning. And it's just so not fun. I don't know, like Yosemite, just pristine, beautiful place. And then you get around that stuff and you're like, damn.
Yeah,
Dude,
I would
just
never do that again.
randomly, good call. I usually camp outside the park on some BLM land and just rush in, do my thing and get out. Yosemite is not really friendly for long-term climbing stays, but unless you pay for crazy lodging like the one or something. But yeah, dude, I just randomly, I was coming up from the Bay back to Reno, and I stopped by the Boulder Field, and because I wanted to session because the Boulder Field is awesome. And I was like, I like climbing. I'd like to go there. But I thought Carlo was up there with you already. But then I bumped into Carlo and got to talk to him for a bit. And then he joined you up there, which was awesome getting to catch up with him. And I also bumped into a listener, a guy named Ben, came up and was like, dude, are you Josh? I was like, that's me. And so it was just fun to
Sweet.
see a listener in the wild. I don't know how he recognized me. Oh, actually, he said he heard me talking to Carlo. He was like, I know that voice, but thanks. Good to see you, Ben, and good stuff at the Boulder Field. Always fun to. God, I mean, the last episode we did, my wife says your setting sucks, which is a hilarious title. Thank you, my wife. Um, and it just reminded me, I love good setting. And I love climbing, dude. I'm back at it, Tim. I am climbing. I am the fall is here. Temps are cold. I went outdoors and had a mega session. I can tell it's the season because my skin was so bad today. Like I couldn't open my MacBook. Like my skin was bad. It's like yes, dude. And my kids are all sick, so that's how I know fall is here. Winter is here. It was nice, dude. It was like my first time climbing without stressing about my shoulder. So it's been about 11 or 12 weeks. And that's a long time to not be feeling at your best, man. That was, that's, so I'm psyched, Tim.
Yeah.
So while you were getting rained out, I got to climb on some boulders and just psyched to be not just living vicariously through you and getting
Yeah.
to do my own thing.
Dude, that's awesome. Yeah, you and I hopped on the phone, and you were like, yeah, well, it wasn't a crazy thing. Like, went out to the saddle boulders, and like, what wasn't a crazy session? I was like, Josh, it's crazy that you're sessioning outside. Like that. Let's face it. That's the cool part. It doesn't matter. I don't care what you're pulling on. I don't care what you're sending. I don't care what anything. Like for me, it makes me happy when you're happy talking about climbing. And
I'm
so
happy,
that was,
Tim.
I mean,
I'm happy. Arms
he's
raised.
stoked. Yeah, no, dude, it matters a lot. I mean, we talk so much on this podcast about like optimization for when you're busy and stuff. Like, how do you make the best out of a single session if you're not going to have? Because it's true. Like we don't. You and I we're obsessed about climbing, but let's face it, we're not the pro climbers who. I mean, I'm a professional climber, but I'm not the traditional professional climber who's just all the time out there. Like you guys barely see me post on Instagram about climbing outside or anything like that. I show up for when I show up for, but this is the deep climbing theory that I care about a lot, and so this is where I feel like my pro climberness goes, and I know you feel the same way, but we like it just as much as everybody else does. So it's super awesome when we get to go out.
I mean, I love just hearing that real behind the scenes of this is the reality. Like we don't all get to climb as much as we would like. And you said something about just me being psyched, even though I didn't have maybe like the best session ever. Although I will say for not climbing in 3 months, and I've climbed maybe like 4 times. Like when I went to the Boulder Field, I think I climbed for an hour, and I probably climbed up to V6. Like just not quite, me at my best. And I was surprised how well I did. And it's just this reminder, so much technique involved. And I do think my consistency on the fingerboard led me to not backslide as much as I thought I would. And it's just a reminder to anyone who's dealing with injuries that, you know, even just showing up and doing what you can, given whatever is holding you back, whether that's your shoulder, whether that's your fingers. And, if it's a finger, maybe you can train your left hand and maybe you can do pull-ups. And it really paid off for me that, yeah, I was actually climbing pretty well when I first got hurt. I was getting psyched, and 3 months is not ideal, but I didn't backslide as much. And when I went out, it was for a buddy's birthday. It was kind of like this older crew that just a bunch of my bros who are all now dads, and we haven't really had time to all get together and climb. And it all came together. And one of the things I was just reflecting on is we bumped into another crew there who was probably us about 15 years beforehand. Like they had playing music, had a tall boy of Steel Reserve. This one guy was, I don't know what he's doing, but he was wearing sunglasses, but it was in the shade and pretty late in the day, and he was climbing in sunglasses. Didn't help him send, I can tell you that. But it was just funny, like seeing like this was us 15 years ago, and this is us now. And there's an element of just recognizing that you will climb with your friends for a long time, and we're going to talk about grades here. We're going to talk about getting stronger. We love all of that pursuit. But I just did have one of those moments where I was like, oh man, there's a lot of community here. There's a lot of joy here. And also we were all pretty in shape and strong. A lot of the guys are in their mid 40s and just getting back into it. But we're climbing between maybe like V6 and V11, and we're climbing on all these problems. And I remember messaging my friend afterwards and just saying, if we're doing the same thing in 15 years, like that's still pretty special. You still get to climb on beautiful climbs. And yes, I'm gonna tell you that I still have V15 in my future. But just a reminder to not get too caught up in grade chasing when you're younger, and to really enjoy these moments, because I got bad news for you. Life gets in the way, and you're not going to be having those like fun, carefree sessions. So don't be miserable out there because you didn't send your project. Try to send your project, try to get stronger, but enjoy it all along the way too.
Nice. Cool, man. Glad you had a good time. One thing I do want to, I don't have anything to say on that because I disagree, and that's cool. But one thing that you said that was kind of interesting, which is just awesome also, because that's what we talk about on the podcast all the time, is you were surprised. Well, it's funny that you are surprised, but you were surprised at yourself and like what you're able to do, right? After 3 months off, even if you're in good climbing shape, before 3 months, 3 months off is going to take all of your physical shape away, almost all your physical shape away that you've gained or like felt good. You will maintain a lot of residual strength, of course, because you have a ton, but you're not going to feel very good. But what you said was, but I was surprised at how good you could still climb. It's like, no, you're not, Josh. Deep down, you're not surprised. Like, but that's the funny thing is that I think we all would be surprised in that same way. I'm surprised actually, I'm surprised almost every session, dude. Like I don't train very much I haven't trained in like years, and I'm surprised every session where I'm like, dude, how am I climbing better than I climbed last time? It's like, oh, well, this is how I create podcast ideas. It's like, this is how I'm climbing better than I did last time. This is what I'm focusing on. This is what I'm trying to do. And it's not physical things. But you always are surprised. Like, I mean, it's a fascinating thing that we're discovering in climbing, how much we should rely on the mental and technical side, because the physical side is not going to be necessarily the reason we do something. It will give us a lot of places to look for new techniques, and a wider net of questions to ask from. But if you're really good, like Dave Graham, at asking this, finding the specific questions to ask and answer in the climbing movements or in a fall, then you probably climb pretty good. So actually, I was not surprised that you could climb well without climbing for 3 months.
Well, I'm glad that you weren't surprised. I think maybe it does speak to some of the stuff we talk about with this. What is your North Star for climbing, and not being so strength oriented? And I think that it's important for me to communicate that one of the reasons why I love that topic is because I am still one of those people who kind of thinks strength first. Like, oh, I had a bad night's sleep, or oh, I haven't been training, so I must not be at my peak. And I've surprised myself a bunch of times, both in how fast I can come back and in sending some of my hardest things when I'm quote unquote untrained or not doing well. And so, despite all the evidence that I have seen that shows me that strength is not the thing I should focus on, number one, it's still hard for me to let it go. And it's not, and again, it's not that you that strength is not important in climbing. We are not saying that. All this stuff is multi-factored, nuanced, but it's just again about kind of showing up, focusing on the right things, focusing on your low-hanging fruit. And I just I say it because I do get sucked into that sometimes. And I had an interesting insight where I'm climbing with this crew of older, I don't know if I call them crushers, just strong climbers. They were always good climbers. Maybe in today's world, they don't seem quite as amazing, but things change over 20 years. And the way that they climbed was so different than the other people at that grade in today's world. And so I'm going to use a example of a problem that you probably know, Tim, but others may not. So I'll just describe it a little bit. There's on the Saddle Boulder, which is the stacked, really amazing, kind of one of the coolest boulders in Tahoe. And there's two climbs there called Midnight Train and Hobo. They're like V8, V9, and they start with a big move. And you go from a kind of decent crimp rail to kind of a juggier crimp rail, and it's hard. And you see a lot of people jumping and latching it. But all of these guys who, I don't know, a few of them did those lines, but it's kind of at their limit right now. Kind of like, kind of at their limit. They all kept their foot on for that move. And I guarantee you that most people who do those climbs who aren't in their 40s don't keep their feet on. And what was interesting is that to them, they just all kept their, it wasn't like we said, hey, you can keep your foot on here. Like you should try keeping your foot on. They just thought that was like the way they did the move. And it was really interesting to me seeing the way they climb and just reflecting on that young crew who was there were jumping and latching it. And they couldn't fathom keeping their foot on, but they were probably stronger than my crew. Like they were physically probably stronger. And maybe the end result is similar, right? They all get up to the top of the climb, or they all do similarly well. But just that coming at it from different ends of the spectrum was really interesting. And again, I'm not saying strength is bad. I'm not saying strength is everything or technique is everything. It's just interesting. It's just interesting to observe.
Yeah, man, I don't even want to talk about this because it's going to be a super long discussion. But I will say that I've had a similar thing every time I watch older climbers. And I guess I will just agree with one thing you're saying. Older climbers are smarter. Older climbers are usually just like they're just better at using the things that they have. Not older climbers, but climbers who've been climbing for a long time. And climbers who've been climbing for a long time, they still may not be able to climb super, super hard because it's not necessarily what they were going for. But when they are climbing things that they're climbing well on, it always looks more confident. It always looks more fluid. It always looks more decisive. Almost always. If I actually see a good older climber who's been climbing for a long time, I know I'm stronger than most of them, but I still am watching and interested and open-minded at like, well, how are they doing it? Because they've been doing it that way for a really long time and they look really good doing it. So I do want to say that that's really interesting. And, for me, I always have hope competing for the rest of my life, for the rest of my 30s or so. I don't know, not for the rest of my life, but not, for a longer time than I thought when I was younger, because people always make this like quote unquote joke that, oh, your prime in comp climbing is like 16 or 18. That's just because those are the people who are winning sometimes, right? And so we're just using an example that we see as making a statement and a generalization. That's not true, right? It is true that some climbers in the current meta of competition have seen a lot of success in the competitions that they're trying or doing, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're better comp climbers. It doesn't mean that they're even better climbers. It doesn't even mean that they're stronger, right? And so what does it mean? I don't know. It means a lot of different things. That's a discussion I don't want to have, but it clearly is shown, and it's been being shown lately, which is a lot of my appreciation for comp climbing has been coming back because I've been seeing this. Jakob and Adam Ondra and even Tomoa are like still on top, man. Like they're still really, really, really good. And that's I'm obviously Serato and Toby, the new young wave is like they're good for what they're good for. But let's just face it, I want to watch Adam and Jakob maintain that top level of climbing for a long time because they in my heart I'm like they're better climbers, aren't they? They're really good.
I mean, I think they probably are, and
Mm-hmm.
just in the sense that it takes time it takes time to be a master at anything. And I'm not so sure if Serato won, he would, go, haha, Andres, see, I'm way better than you. It's just that I think one of the things is that the meta has changed so significantly, so quickly that, it's tough to wrap your head around what's next. And then in some ways you have people who are just predisposed to that current meta and they see success. But then over the span of decades, when Adam Ondra is an incredible slab climber, every climber,
Mm-hmm.
he's incredible at everything. And so is Tomoa. His ability to weave all those metas that he's been involved in into making him a complete climber is really cool. And I don't want to go too far down the comp meta, but there's one last thing that I really wanted to say about my experience climbing with these guys who are technique first. And I had gone on this rant about don't be so closed minded. Like you think you know how to climb, but you don't. Like and I just want to point out a scenario where that was me, right? Like an example where because people may think that what I'm saying is listen to Josh, like he knows what he's talking about, but that's not what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say that I often think I know what I'm talking about, but I try to keep an open mind because I'm often wrong. And we were climbing on this tricky V6 arete on, I guess I would call it like the warm up boulder right by the main saddle boulder. And, you're at the top, you kind of got two side poles, and there's kind of this committing move. And so I get there, and the feet are a little bit weird. There's not really a good foot choice, but like you're on two pretty decent holds. And I jumped off from there and I was like, I know what I need to do. I need to put my foot up onto one of these smears and just kind of like commit. Like I just need to commit. And I just didn't want to commit. I haven't been climbing outside. It's actually pretty tall. And so I think to myself, like, okay, I'm just going to commit. So then my buddy comes along and he just does this different sequence and gets his foot up first. And it just was way better. He chose the really good foot up high and he just floated it. And what really was interesting to me about that, and I did it like he did, I was like, Jesus, that was easy. Just a slightly different sequence, just a time to get your foot up. But what really got me is that had I been in better shape and been stronger and been more used to committing to bad feet, I would have just done it that way I wanted to. I would have just said, you know what? Just paste your foot on something crappy. You're strong, just force it. And I would have done it. But it would not have been V6. Like it would have been V8. But I would have done it. And then when I just followed my buddy's lead who deconstructed it way better, I was like, this is so easy. What was I thinking? And it's just an example of where, physically, maybe I was capable of doing something else and I could have just forced it, but keeping my mind open and seeing someone who maybe is, I don't want to, he's going to listen. Is maybe physically, we'll say physically a notch below me, but I would argue has as good or better technique on that kind of vertical techie granite. Just that was the way I do it. And I watched him and I copied him and I let that ego go and I let that burl go and I learned something.
I seem to coach youth climbers in this way a lot. It's an awesome story that you're talking about. It's a really common one that a lot of climbers have where, but yeah, you probably, if you really think back on your climbing log, anybody, you can think about all the climbs that you've done and you probably could have done them all better. You probably could have found beta that was easier or like more efficient for you. It's not necessarily the point. It doesn't matter that much, to be honest. But the point that you're talking about is it's about how you look at the climb. It's about how you look at the move. And what it sounds like is a lot of the time that you're doing the moves, or a lot of the time that you're climbing on things maybe not at your difficulty cap, you're just looking at how you would do the move, how you should do the move based on you. Versus this person who's climbing maybe closer to their limit on this climb is looking at how they should do the move, period. How the climb wants them to do the move based on the holds that they have available to them, based on what they can't do, based on what they can do. Because you have so much room to do infinite variability on this climb, basically you can do it at the level that it's supposed to be at, but you can also do it probably 4 levels up, a lot of different ways. You're going to look for the way that looks most comfortable to you. If you have a good definition, if you have a good foundation of, quote unquote, what's comfortable to you, and that is a wide net, then that would be a good way to approach it. But it sounds like maybe you learned that you need to open the net a little bit wider and be like, maybe I should have included that as something that I think is a good way to climb, right? It's not necessarily so much that I think you didn't see that. It's just that your foundation for what you think works in climbing just like wasn't wide enough. You didn't ask enough questions, basically. And that happens a lot. And I think, yeah, good for you. It's like, I think it's one thing to be like, why didn't I do that or whatever? But more so it's like my understanding in climbing over the years. And I love what you said before. You brought up a story where like you're basically saying that you shouldn't listen to me because I know how to climb. You should listen to me because I've messed up climbing a lot. And now I know how to climb because of that.
I keep messing it up.
Yeah, and me too. I feel like I can coach youth athletes and I can coach athletes in general because by like year 9, I felt successful as a rock climber. By like my 9th year, but I put just as much intention and effort into it, if not more than some people I know who are much, much better than me at climbing. So I knew that, if I put in tons and tons of work and tons of effort, then maybe I'll learn a lot along the way. And it doesn't necessarily amount to the best resume, but it amounts to a deeper understanding of the sport, which is really nice to talk about.
Well, it really made me think of this thing you said where if you go out and tick a bunch of climbs, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting to be a better climber. And this is a great example of it. And I just want to clarify because Ben is listening. That climb is not near his limit, but he was, even though he followed my same sequence at the start, he was willing to just throw it away and say, there's probably an easier way and try something new. And, I just got to credit him for that, style of thinking. But it really makes me think that thing where you have to be careful about those little bite-sized dopamine snacks of just getting, sending. And I could have just sent it, right? I really could have just forced it, but instead, and then I would have had something that I probably wouldn't even logged on my 8A because for me, it was not relevant or significant. But now I learned something there. And look, it's not like it's the most epic learning thing I've ever gone through. Just like, oh yeah, okay, Josh, yeah, remember to maybe bump your feet up first instead of your hand. Just I don't even know. This is that idea that we talk about where you climb with intuition and then something goes wrong and you have to analyze and then you try to build it back into your intuition. And it's just like every little moment is a learning experience. Like, it's just, this was another opportunity to add to my climbing knowledge. And I think I did.
Yeah,
so
that's cool. Stuff. A lot of the stuff you're talking about is really in tune with the notes that I wrote for the topic of today. And we're not going to go into the topic of today right now, but it's just I just wanted to say that, and that's really cool. I mean, I think that I mean, you and I deeply believe in climbing theory is deeper than just your resume, and it's more about how you look at climbing and how you decide to teach yourself in climbing is the more important approach. But that's a given in our podcast. That's awesome, dude. You've been climbing. You have those stories. That's awesome. I'm gonna continue.
I've been climbing, Tim. I'm climbing. Yeah, okay,
that's awesome.
Okay.
I gotta continue because we have too much to talk about. We're running out of time already, and I haven't even told you past week 1 of my 4-week trips. But I went to Yosemite. I went to Facelift. BD sponsored that event.
Thank you,
I'm gonna
BD.
brag a bit. About my relationship with Black Diamond because I really like it. And it's not to say that, I'm a professional climber or whatever, and that's cool. No, I think what's cool is that BD is a cool company and I get to work with a really cool company. And they do cool stuff. And I want to just share, sorry, Josh, I don't mean to just like jump to a new gear, but I just wanted to finish this off because I don't want to keep talking about this stuff. I want to talk about the topic for this.
Yeah, we don't want to talk about Josh climbing some crappy V6s after being injured. We want to hear about Tim, professional climber, doing cool stuff with a cool company. I made that sound
No,
sarcastic,
that
but as I was
sounds
talking about, that's actually is what I want to hear. So Tim,
no,
you were doing
that sounds super.
facelift, yeah,
That sounds super
and then
arrogant. It's
what's
not what I'm
next?
trying to say. Like that's not what I'm trying to say at all.
I'm just
Your
kidding,
stories
man.
are super cool, and that's awesome. But I have a lot to share, and I'm not going to share it on the next podcast. So I don't. Before we forget to share this stuff, I just want to go into it.
Share on,
Um,
my dude.
so we went to Facelift, did the Facelift event, left early. The rest of the event went on, but it didn't really matter because we were kind of there we were there, the objective that they sent me there for was one day. And I mostly wanted to stay longer because I wanted to stay and pick up more trash because we picked up like tons of trash one day. And I was like, oh my God, dude, I want to go around this entire park and pick up as much as I can. But that's just a good sign to say, for me, I felt kind of shitty about leaving Yosemite, but shout out to Facelift for inspiring me and all of us, hopefully, to just pick up trash, guys. If you see it, if you're outside and you just see it and you're like, oh, that's just a tiny piece of trash, like that's a bummer. Like I wish there wasn't trash here. Pick it up, like just straight up. Period. Like I don't care. I don't care. You don't care. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Pick up the trash. Like it's just straight up like there's no event that's necessary for us to go pick up trash. It's not to say that Facelift is the reason why I want to go pick up trash. No, it was just cool to like hear some numbers and be like, wow, there is tons and tons and tons of trash out there. Sometimes if you want to spend, 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes off of your day while you're out to go off the beaten path a little bit to pick up trash, because there's gonna be some, off of bigger pits and stuff that fall down, like bottles go everywhere. I picked up an entire backpack, a brand new backpack with like all the stuff in it, just off the railing of Vernal Falls, just
Sure.
off of
Someone probably was like, dude, someone jacked my backpack.
it.
I just, one thing I really quickly want to say about picking up trash and doing the facelift is that, yes, we should all pick up trash, but I do think it's really cool. And yeah, again, pick up your own trash and then pick up for every time you're out. Just even if everyone just picked up one piece of trash, it would be a big deal every time they went out. But this is where it's cool when you have these organizations, Black Diamond, like Access Fund, and you, even if we all did our part, there still needs to be someone who steps in and takes it to that next level. And I just think it's cool that there's people out there doing that. And I'm glad that also you, as an athlete for Black Diamond, like I'm glad that they pull you into that. So it's instead of just you doing sick cutting edge sends, it's like, no, this is part of what being part of the community is giving back by helping.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and on that note, like I think it was easy for me to be like, oh, dude, humans are horrible. Like we litter so much and stuff. But I got to say, the vast majority of things that we picked up were, water bottles, a lot of water bottles and stuff. A lot of just like empty bottles, full bottles, like doesn't matter. The vast majority of stuff that we picked up is microplastics. Wrappers, pieces of wrappers that come off, just pieces of plastic that break apart from other things and probably fly off. You may be an accidental cause of trash on the floor, and that's okay. And we should just go and pick that stuff up because that's the vast majority of stuff you're going to see on the ground is like microplastic. But that's also the stuff that's probably the most harmful for those, animals out there, probably just eating that stuff. And, there's, if you're listening to the podcast, you probably know enough about some environmental things to know that we're not in a good place on Earth. So something that I at least care about a little bit. So just go pick up some trash. Anyway, I agree with you. It's really cool that BD as a company, a brand that makes climbing gear is supporting their athletes to go and do something like this. And I'm sponsored, so obviously I feel somewhat obligated to say something about it. But I'm not saying that because of that. I really just had a great time. It inspired me. I really wish, to be honest, I wish that more people were a part of that. And more athletes were just like enticed to go and do stuff like that because it's what you're like partaking in. But anyway, I think it's really cool. We went home to Vegas, had some R&R. I was really tired after that trip. It's exhausting camping for like a week straight. Went back to Salt Lake City and for another BD shoot. Sam Elias is an older athlete, much older than me climbing out. He's older than you too.
I don't know. I want to look it up now.
I think he's 41.
Okay. Woo.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, old guy.
He's badass, dude, for being 41. Like, what the hell? I mean, like, okay, basically this video project, dude, I want to keep this short. This is way too much me talking, but I'm going to keep this as short as possible. But it was really cool and I really want to share it. We did a Rebolting mentorship project. So he did a 4-video part series with himself, 2 other athletes that I'm not allowed to talk about, I think, Colin Duffy, and then me. And we were rebolting super classic routes in really cool areas. Specifically, I was doing the Big Smile in the Narrows, which is in Salt Lake City. It's a boon speed route, goes at 14 BC. It's really short, 45, 50 feet tall. One of the coolest pieces of limestone I've climbed on ever. It's really, really amazing. I don't have to go too deep into that, but basically this project was, it's a 2-day shoot. We went and we did like one day, a rest day, and then the next day. And the goal was to rebolt, to learn about bolts, learn about, why bolts are the way they are. There's a lot of different types of mechanical bolts, how easily they can get undone, how dangerous they can be, and how dangerous they can be over time, and just educate myself and people who are going to watch this video, but then also educate the process of how to bolt. Up until then, I was a route setter for a long time. Like I've been climbing for a long time. I've been at sport cracks a lot. I should be somebody who knows how to bolt. I really should be, because who else is going to do it, right? Like it's a dying breed of people. It's not. But also, if you ever clipped a draw outside, you're probably climbing on a bolt that somebody put on the wall, right? It had to be safe. It's nuanced. It's difficult. It's physical tolling work. It's not what I'm talking about necessarily, but it was just kind of like shocking and sad to me to realize that, like, I don't even know how to do this at all. I don't know how to use a hammer drill. I don't know how to check rock. I don't know how to exactly place them. I don't even know how to get up or down the wall without putting bolts on the wall, without having those bolts on the wall originally. So it was a cool process, man. It was really cool. And to be honest, it didn't necessarily teach me exactly how to go and do that process, because we were rebolting things, not bolting things. But it was a good stepping stone into, I guess, providing that awareness and education for something that's really important in climbing, a really removed aspect of climbing. You guys go enjoy, everybody goes and enjoys. Not even talking about route setting. Route setting is it's the same thing. If you're climbing on something, someone put it up and someone thought about it, right? And so we shit talk route setting all the time. We talk about why route setting could be better or why it's not that good. But also, let's just talk about appreciating it, right? And just appreciating the fact that we don't appreciate it, or just seeing the fact that we don't appreciate it often. We don't really think that other people are doing this stuff. Our culture is so removed from those things. So I guess me just sharing that, I'm happy that Sam, first of all, shout out. Hopefully we can get him on the podcast soon, just to talk about his experience and his thoughts. And, he can answer a lot of the stuff about this project a lot better. Shout out to Sam for thinking about something like that. First of all, it's so cool just to think about a younger community being a part of your process as a climber. And Black Diamond, shout out to Black Diamond for supporting a project like that, right? It's not cheap. It's not easy. It's not, it's not just something you do for fun.
But
BD has to support a big project like this.
But it's freaking necessary to have bolts get replaced. It's necessary to have that skill transfer. I think it's really cool that you acknowledge just where you are in your life cycle as a climber. It's like, okay, you started climbing. Okay, you started route setting. Okay, you climb outdoors. Okay, maybe you should take up that mantle and contribute again like that. And it is cool. Again, it's kind of like what we were talking about with the whole facelift. Like, it's nice to have companies with the resources come in and help facilitate that. And it's mind blowing. I mean, I'm just as guilty as anyone. I have never drilled a bolt, but it's also mind blowing that we just trust them, man. Like, it's just this blind, like everyone just clips a bolt. It's like, that's what, it's almost like a trope. Clip a bolt, like you're safe, just clipping bolts. I have pulled, I've pulled hangers before. I have definitely gone off of anchors. We were just like, oh God, is this gonna
Dude, Sam pulled one off by hand when we were replacing them on Big Smile. He pulled the nut and the hanger off by hand, one of them, just to replace it. He was like, you see this? This is why these things happen so quickly. So, and that's, we're not trying to scare you guys necessarily, but you should be scared. You should be out there skeptical and being like, okay, I shouldn't just like mindlessly trust everything that I like take fat whips on. Maybe just check it once extra at least, and or look for glue-ins. Glue-ins were what we were using, and glue-ins are solid, and they're going to stay on the wall probably for a long time.
My co-host says your bolting sucks. That's gonna be our next podcast. Yeah, and big thanks to everyone who does bolt. It's, I don't know, we've done this shout out a few times, where just showing that appreciation. I don't blame you if you're younger and you just kind of are rolling your eyes at this. Like, I get it. Like, when you're younger, it's kind of like take, and that's fine. But in some ways, what I like hearing about this is Sam starting to, is doing that next step where you see these younger people and they're like, take, and not I'm not saying take on the rope as in while you're climbing. I mean, like you're just taking what the community offers you. It's like, I'm going to clip these bolts. I'm going to tick this climb. I don't even give a shit. I'm just doing it. And then hopefully someone comes along, does a little mentorship, kind of shows you the ropes, to make a really bad dad pun. And slowly but surely you grow into that responsible community leader. And I think that's the trajectory of a good climber. So
Yeah.
yeah, if you're 15, you think this is dumb, I get it. But just keep your eyes open, at least show a little gratitude, and
Yeah.
feel lucky for their people like Sam, and
Yeah.
maybe a little bit of Tim. Thank you,
Yeah,
Tim.
just a little bit.
Yeah.
I think climbing media is, hot take. Climbing media sucks nowadays. Like, not to
Except
say
for
that
this
everything.
podcast. I actually have some climbing media I
Visual,
want to talk about afterwards. Yeah.
cool.
But
Visual climbing
go ahead.
media kind of sucks. It's. I think everyone feels a bit similarly, where it's like, yeah, what's going on? Like, there's a lot of climbing porn out there. There's a lot of like, and it's not to say that stuff's not cool, but it's like something's missing. Something's missing in the media. It's not to say that it's also just like full on mentorship projects, but there's stories that we want to see and a little bit more depth in the climbing media. I'm excited to try to break through with a company like Black Diamond and make more, I don't know, relatable content, maybe not even relatable content, but content that like has deeper storylines behind the scenes. So it makes more, I don't know what people are really into, but I know I'm into more depth than what I'm currently seeing. And I want to be a
No.
part of that.
Well, you have a long form podcast. It's called Testpiece.
Yeah.
Well, I want to talk about a little bit of the climbing media I saw this past couple of weeks, and the one that really got me. And you probably don't care about this, Tim, but Martin Keller. I think it's like Martine Keller. I'm not sure. Forgive me if I'm pronouncing this wrong, but he just sent a climb called Gateway, about roughly a V16 boulder. You're like, yeah, cool, Josh. V16, not that cool, but he's 46, or he's just about to
Dude,
turn 46.
that's insane.
And you guys, like, I'm old, I'm 37, but 46 is really old. I'm just kidding to all those people. I was climbing with people who are older than 46, but it's just, well, actually, I'm going to say a different
No,
way.
it is really old to climb hard, dude.
Well,
Like,
yeah, it's not that 46 is really old. It's that V16 is really freaking hard. That's what it is. That's what's impressive. And it just made me think of something you talk about, Tim, where uh, I'm going to just jump forward to the punchline. It's this concept of prove it. Like you often say, prove to me you can't. And I curated my words here on the podcast. I'm getting older. I'm too old to climb my first V15 now. And, I have no actual evidence for that, right? Like there's no reason for me to actually think that. In fact, with sends like this from Martin Keller, it's like, actually I have evidence against that perhaps my best days can still be in front of me. And so it just made me think about not being so defeatist in general. It's just dumb. It's like, what benefit is it to me to think that I'm too old for X, Y, or Z? I prefer your approach of, it's like, okay, Josh, prove to me that you can't do V16. It's like, if you can't, okay, great. At least you found out, but giving up before you even try, that's just the wrong approach. That's where it really struck home for me. And yeah, it just made me think of, my whole crew that I'm out there with. And yes, we were talking about just having fun with them, but I mean, let's face it, we're all here trying to do our best, and that's part of the
yeah.
fun. It's part of the
Yeah, I
fun.
love I love that you're kind of repeating that, and that kind of came from my personality was, it's more in line with your natural personality to have a kind of a deeper assessment already of what your capabilities are, and then kind of revolve around that. And I was coached for a while by this guy named Justin Cubbage, who was the head coach of our team at Planet Granite, and I coached with him for a long time. But he was coaching me as well. I paid him to coach me, and that was a common thing that he said to me. If I said, nah, like I don't think that's gonna go this way, and sometimes it would be, it wasn't the point whether the move actually was a way or not. The point was I rarely checked if something was going to be a certain way better or worse. I had super, super strong opinions to not even get me to try. Sometimes I was right, and there would be and sometimes I was wrong. And there'd be a gray area where I would learn a lot if I had just tried. And if I just proven something. And Justin always told me, prove to me you can't do a move. I don't care what you can do. Prove to me you can't do a move. He always said that on the team as well. So shout out to Justin Cubbage. Hope you're doing well, buddy. But yeah, super, super
Well,
important.
well, now you're sharing it with everyone listening, and that was actually that experience I had on that V6 I was describing earlier, where when my buddy did that high foot, I was like, "No, dude, like that foot's too high." Like I was like, I made up all these excuses.
Boo.
And then, but then I had Tim sitting on my shoulder, saying,
Yay.
Give it a shot." And then I sent it, and I was like, "Damn, that was easy. That was easy."
That's so awesome, dude. I gotta say though, it's awesome that you're sharing that battle because, I also feel sometimes like people who listen to this podcast are like, oh, Josh and Tim, like they're so removed, like they don't know, and it's like I love that you're sharing a local recent battle. It's the exact same thing that a lot of people are probably going into, and it's real, man. I mean, I go into this all the time. It's hard to see the reality, kind of what you're saying before of like what actually goes on, but we're pretty real people. We just do this a lot, and we're obsessed.
Yeah. So speaking of real people, you want to talk about some not so real people? Brooke and Shawn Raboutou did. You like that segue? Should I try that again?
Perfect. Do it again. Do it again.
They are real people. They're just mutants of beastly strength. And Shawn put up a YouTube video of him and Brooke on the moon board. And Tim, I like the moon board. You like the moon board, and so I clicked on that. I clicked on that video super quick and sent it to you. And I had mixed feelings about it. I feel like it was a little bit of like a clickbait thing. They're like, the moon board is popular, so Shawn and Brooke are going to try the moon board and do the moon board. It just didn't feel like the kind of deep dive that, of course, we like. That's kind of what we're all about. But I'll take what I can get. And they flashed a V10. They did flash some V9s. And there was this one V10 flash that Shawn did. I think it was called Check In Now. And just this dyno at the end. Like, it's just,
when you just held that hole with one hand.
Oh, God. It just
so easily.
Just float, dude. Just that bouncy Shawn style, where, I think one of the things about it is that nothing was hard for them. And that was what kind of disappointed me. That was a good example of how he was just cruising, just doing something sick. Like it showcased how good he really was, even though that climb was not hard for him. It kind of bummed me out a little bit that like all those climbs that they did, I'm not saying they're easy, like V9s, some of the V10s, like they weren't easy. This was the 2019 set, but just having quite a bit of familiarity with all those climbs, they weren't really hard. Like they were all those holds were just jugs for them. Those moves were big, but they didn't care. And I wanted to see them on my kind of hard. When I think of the moon board and I think of hard climbing on the 2019, I think of this. I don't know if it's a 12 or a 13 that Aiden Roberts set that I just think is nails. That's why I want to see Shawn and Brooke do.
Yeah, there's a lot. Josh texted me this video, and don't get me wrong, dude. Like watching the Raboutou's crush is definitely awesome for everybody. So I don't feel bad. I don't feel bad saying this, but he sent me this video link, and he was like, "We got to talk about this on the pod." And I was like, "Oh, cool! Like I'll watch this." I mean, I love watching moonboard content, especially of the Raboutous. I got to watched it and watched like a 7 or 8 minute little montage of them just shitting on moonboard climbs. Sorry, I was asked to not say that as much, but absolutely romping up these boulders really easily. Boulders that, Josh and I have done. I'm pretty sure you and I have done all of those climbs. They're hard, like for sure they're hard climbs, but not that hard for them. For sure, not that hard for them. And the video is also called, this is what bothered me. The video was called, I don't know exactly what it was called, but it had to entail secrets of the moonboard. Like they were revealing secrets of the moonboard, and they didn't reveal anything. They didn't talk.
I'm going to look this up and make sure we're not saying
something's talking about secrets of the moonboard. And I guess I learned nothing. I learned almost nothing. What is
you're
what's
right.
it called?
Moonboard secrets with Brooke Raboutou. Yeah, there was no the secret is just Shawn and Brooke. That doesn't count.
I was super disappointed watching this video just because of what it was titled. It was just kind of misleading, but it's a cool video, and it's that climbing porn I was talking about. But at the end, Shawn asks Brooke a couple of questions, and it's just like, I don't know. I guess if they're calling that secrets, I think it'd be way cooler if they did the moonboard content that we're asking for, which is harder climbing and actual secrets of the moonboard, because there are secrets. And just because they maybe have them inside, it doesn't mean that they can't talk about them. Like they do have secrets, of course, that get them up the wall that are, maybe not necessarily secrets, but things that they think or talk about.
I was just thinking, like, is it POF? Are they using resin? What are these secrets, dude? Like,
no, but it's like, the little tricks, and Shawn did a good job
I'm
asking
just
some
giving you
questions,
shit.
but it was
Yeah.
it was such a short segment of the video. Anyway, I think that video was potential to be super super cool.
Dude,
What was it?
whatever secrets Brooke and Sean have up their genetic sleeves, I wanna know. Just kidding. I actually, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to say anything negative about it because I watched it and was psyched and sent it to you. I just, I was so psyched that I guess I just wanted more. And so, yeah, Sean or Brooke, if you're listening, yeah, please come on and go deep with us. Or just when you make content, like we love you guys. We love what you have to offer. I just want more and deeper.
Do more.
Like that, the one word, the random question with a one word answer. There's a lot more to Olympians and V17 climbers than one word answer. For example, Nathaniel Coleman. Um, he gave us a lot more than one word answers, and that was an
Yeah.
amazing podcast. So,
And I don't think he even knew he was going to say a lot of those things. So, just
yeah,
got to try.
it's in there though. Okay, Tim, should we move on to our reflections section? Are you ready to move on?
Do it.
Okay, our last guest was Katie Lamb. That was awesome, man. I was really just psyched to have Katie on, and I mean, I said it on the podcast like 80 times, but it is such a big freaking deal to be the first woman in the world to climb V16. Like it just is. I mean, she will be on Wikipedia, like it will go down in history. And I don't know if I said this in the pod, but Katie is smart, successful, hilarious. Like she went to Stanford, and it's just fun. I don't know why I like that, but seeing her be the one to push those barriers, I just like. I think she's a really good person. She has tons of depth, and rather than just I don't know. I'm not going to take the negative approach and say the people that I don't want to have done it. Just again, doubling down on Katie's awesome. I'm so happy it was her, and I'm so amazed at what she did, and just psyched to get to that she shared it with us too.
Yeah, there was a lot of really good. And I got to double up on that stuff. I mean, Katie also seemingly blew up very quickly. Like her, she was like very good at climbing for a while, but not anyone that you would see on like magazines or anything like that for those reasons. And almost seemingly within like a couple of years, it was just like bang, boom, boom. And then box therapy. It was like, you know, almost like, almost like you can't even be that shocked, like almost like Margot doing 515 was like bigger in some way because you didn't expect that, but Katie, you almost like did expect it because of her trajectory. And then
Well,
trajectory
only
was
if you were
just like,
paying attention. I feel like
only
she
if you're
was
paying
kind of
attention. That's fair.
underground,
Yeah.
but when you're like, oh, Jade, oh, Spectre, oh,
Right.
okay, oh, Dominic, okay, oh, and then when she
Right.
did it, yeah, she was clearly psyched, but she also was not so impressed with herself in the sense she wasn't like, wow, like it was like, yeah, I mean, I'm climbing really well, and this was a hard climb
Totally.
and in my style, like, of course, and that's kind of it's interesting because we're saying it's like both things. It's like
Hmm.
amazing and surprising, and then not surprising. But you're
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
that her progress has just been this linear progress for the last 5 years, just
Yeah.
amazing progress.
Super, super interesting. But yeah, I like the podcast, man. I thought it was, and I do want to address, because I don't know if we've addressed this, but I'm not on some of the guest podcasts simply because I've asked Josh to do some of them by himself. I think it's obviously sometimes I just don't have the time to, and it just will be easier. And that's what happened in this case. But actually, after Jamie Emerson's episode, I like having Josh on there by himself because sometimes having me on there, I talk too much. Sometimes I say too many tangents or whatever, or personally, I feel that way. I did feel a little bit of regret for not hopping on with Katie specifically, but there were other guests where I'm like, this was better, I think, without me. And so sometimes it's intentional and sometimes it's a little bit, but anyway, I
I
really like
missed you,
listening.
Tim. I missed you. I always
I know,
miss you.
yeah. I mean, I miss it with you, but it's a product. But well, I'm just looking at it as a product afterward because I get to listen to it afterward, and I'm like, oh wow, this was really cool and like really good. And this was the first podcast that you did by your, without me. That I was like, I wish I was like a part of it. I do want to say that, but nonetheless, it was awesome. I think what was really cool was all the little insights that you ask about. You just know, like, it's kind of hard to tell the way that you ask. You can almost like you can assume that maybe you don't climb that hard, until you realize that you do, and you're like, wow, these are really well thought out questions. And so there was a lot of insight. I'm not going to go into any of them because you listen to the podcast, but that was really cool. It was just cool hearing about her process. She's really casual, like the way that she explains everything. And I think it was really good too that you did you brought up almost like by the time you brought it up, I didn't even realize how much gravity that V16 female ascent box therapy held until you brought that up. That like if you look it up, you'll see Katie Lamb on Wikipedia. It's like, dude, you're right. Like that's insane. Like that is so cool. And that was like halfway through the pod.
Wikipedia is like the definitive, like, wow, you're on Wikipedia. For sure. Thank you for some of those kind words, and I did miss you. And it's interesting when I think about the questions I ask, and yeah, does it matter if I'm a V5 climber or a V15 climber, which I'm neither of those. And I think what is really fun when you get to talk to someone who's doing amazing things is I thought that visualization part was really amazing. I really, really enjoyed it. And for me, and my mindset is, yeah, I mean, I do visualization, but then there's all these things that kind of go in my head that I'm not even sure if other people have that experience. And the one that really got me is that we all talk about visualization. But when I was talking to Katie and thinking about visualization, I realized that sometimes in my visualization, I don't feel good. Like I struggle to get through it. And asking her, like, what happens when you don't feel good? Like, how do you, Katie Lamb, V16 climber, really good mental game climber, do you have negative thoughts when you visualize? And what do you do about it? And I just think that really allowing us to keep on peeling back each layer, as you and me, as being climbers who have kind of been there, personally, not at that level, but I feel like I've lived, I've been in project mode before. I've tried these things, and then getting to hear from someone who is an expert what that next layer might be, because I don't know.
Totally.
And then her illuminating, I thought it was really cool when she said that sometimes she falls in her visualization. And that's just, I think the reason why that was so interesting to me is it tied into the actual act of climbing, your mental game, in this way that showed that when Katie was visualizing, she was climbing, right? Like it's not like when we talk about visualizing, it's not, okay, I'm like grabbing this hole and this hole and this hold, like, and then I'm at the top, yay. Like, yeah, I guess that's visualizing. That's some form of it. But when we're really talking about going deep, Katie's in there climbing, and then she falls sometimes. It just blew my mind. And so I really enjoyed that. Anyways, I love that
correct
stuff.
me if I'm wrong, but I think I said that stuff on the sequencing podcast. But I don't think I said exactly that I fall sometimes sequencing, but I did, well, I will say that when I coach youth climbers, when I coach competitive athletes or talk about competitive things, and, to be fair, I'm a competitor, so it's not like I spray or talk about these things commonly. I'll share them with people who really care and want to get better at it. But I've always done pretty well in lead competitions. And the one thing that, easily without training, like it comes to me very naturally to like do my best on a lead route in competition. And it's because you have this thing called preview. And in preview, you can think and look at your problem. That's unique. That's a unique thing in competition. Bouldering is not about that. Bouldering is about turning around, trying, and then doing your best in a 4-minute scenario, right? Whether that becomes you're flashing the boulder, which is something that Nathaniel was really good at for a long time. And turns out it kind of came from this like pre-visualization or this in the moment visualization Nathaniel was really good at, where he was able to see the falls that might happen on the wall, right? But if you can see those falls before you got on the wall, that's also really important. And I brought this up to a kid that I coach, Vale. Jesse Grouper is another climber. We're going to talk about this later in the discussion because this is very integral to flashing. But Jesse Grouper is someone that always stood out to me when I was in preview. He almost in the beginning, the way that he would sequence things was he would talk about the things that maybe seemed hard or like seemed too hard, or like maybe that's not something that looked very enticing. And I was always like, that guy's not that confident. Like, how is he in first place every time? And I was like, oh shit, it's not that he's not confident. He's just really good at seeing the things that might happen, and it's not to say if those things lead to an emotional thing, that's maybe not so good, right? But just having that awareness, of course, that stuff helps. Of course, understanding what might cause you to fall, versus just looking at the proactive plan forward, that's a little bit, that's too narrow minded, right? We have to be able to climb. So I always tell the kids, don't sequence the route, climb the route in your sequence. Just climb it over and over again. So it's just funny because I feel like I've said that many, many, many times in the last year. And when somebody like Katie, first B16 female ascensionist, says it, it becomes a little bit more like law. And I guess I don't want to sound like I'm like, oh, I said it before her. But my point is like that exists in high level climbing for sure. A lot of people have said that. That's awesome that she values that as well. But that's just an important thing to do. If you guys aren't doing that, everyone should be doing that, right? If you're going to sequence something, and again, way before that, we had a whole sequencing podcast. Sequencing itself is important. So if you're not even there yet, that's a very important thing to implement. But check it out. The highest level climbers do it. Everybody does it. And sometimes we have to do it in competition, but you just should do it. It's a very important part of your process.
Yeah. And, this mental game that we talk about often on the podcast, I just want to remind people that it's not the only thing you have to do, right? What makes Katie special may be that she has an extremely strong mental game. And I think I mentioned this on the podcast that what I did to prep is I reached out to tons of her friends, tons of other professional climbers, and they all said, Katie's mental game is next level, right? But that's why we dug into that. She also has strong fingers. She has a great work ethic. She trains. So, don't think that just visualizing, you can sit below box therapy and visualize a whole bunch might not get you up it. But so Tim, you hinted at our topic for the day. We're going to talk about flashing quite a bit. And I just thought it was funny because Katie, I'm sure Katie's flashed some hard boulders, but we talked to her about this this view of climbing, this love of digging into a project, really testing your limits, and just that she loved that projecting mentality. And so I just think it's hilarious that now we're going to talk about flashing, the opposite. But before we do that, Tim, I got a couple of announcements.
Wait, sorry. Before you start that, can I comment on what you just said?
Go ahead.
Because I think that actually was one thing I had a little bit of controversial thoughts on when Katie said that in the podcast. It was the only thing that I heard a discussion about in the podcast, and I hope I don't get roasted for this or anything. But it's just my thoughts. I think that's bad. I don't think we should look at flashing as like. I just wish that she didn't avoid that as much. It obviously, obviously it leans. Sorry, before you interrupt, but obviously it means that
jump in. I want to.
I know. I was like, yeah, don't do that. I feel like I'm not saying that anything is bad about what she's doing. That's not what I'm saying. But I do want to defend this flashing concept. Obviously, is what we're going to talk about today. I think there's merit to all approaches and every approach in climbing, and I just didn't like that. I guess. For herself, she doesn't value these things, but I wouldn't do that if I was her. I think that she would gain a lot from having that introduced to her, really accepting it. And like, who knows how much better she would be at climbing if she had that aspect. And I guess I used that to make a lot of my notes as to like why I think flashing is a good part of your process. But sorry, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say that I want to be very clear that when I talked to Katie about some of her views on climbing and what she loved in climbing, it was never her saying negative things about different approaches to climbing. She didn't say
totally
like this is the wrong way to climb. She just talked about what she was inspired by and how she enjoyed climbing. And so, it was very clearly never her taking away a different way of climbing, just what she was deeply inspired by. And also, we don't know how much she focuses on flashing, or if maybe she will change her tune. She's still young. So, and I don't know if she even explicitly said she didn't like flashing. She just didn't like
you're right in that she was just saying what she's really, really interested in is spending a lot of time. And then she even did say that, like, it doesn't matter to me what other people do with that, which is super respectable to say. But I do know what, when people say like, well, this is what's super, super inspiring to me, it means that everything else is really, really probably not that inspiring. So I'm just pointing that out. I was like, well, I don't know. There's a lot of aspects of climbing that are super, super inspiring to me. All of them are super inspiring to me. whether you spend a lot of time on something, whether you do something first try, whether you are competing, whether you're doing something outside, it's all super, super fascinating and, inspiring to me. And so I guess like, I guess like it's hard because we have these superheroes come on our podcast and they all end up being just like real people who like spend a lot of time and a lot of work and have the same realizations that you and I do a lot of the time, just like at a different level. And I don't have V16 under my belt, but I have a lot of deep feelings and fascinations, and I'm trying to get there. Well, not try. I haven't even tried yet. But I hopefully will get there. And I don't want the resume necessarily to like I said before, just because these kids are winning the competitions, it doesn't mean that kids are the gold standard for being the best competitive athlete. I guess is like what I'm saying. Katie has figured out some amazing things. That podcast is awesome. She's got such good processes, but this podcast is kind of about balancing like the other side of what, climbing, all aspects of climbing could be.
Tim, you were climbing on a V16 since I last talked to you. Well, let's not go into that. But you did take a crack at a V16 and had some success. But
felt pretty good.
Okay, I just got a couple of quick announcements.
Go for it.
We've got another classroom coming up this Wednesday. There's still time to join if you want to talk to me and Tim about whatever burning questions you have. I have a hunch, Tim, this one's going to be a long one because I've been getting a bunch of good questions, and it's just hard to not answer them. Like you get the ball rolling, and you're like, oh, like just another one. Like it's because it's so fun to just go in deep on this stuff. So if you want to join Patreon, the classroom tier is there. But yeah, just I want to let people know because I get a lot of interactions on people on Instagram and they ask me a question and I respond, and then they often apologize for not being a patron or like being on Patreon. I just like Patreon is 100% not required to interact with us. Like we are here. We love climbing. You do not need to give us money to reach out to us and talk to us about climbing. And also, if you want to contribute in other ways, send your favorite episode to a friend. Like share your episode on Instagram, write a review. Those all really help us. And I mean, yes, huge thank you to all of our patrons, our patrons. But we're a community here, and the currency is the love of climbing, not dollars. So just wanted to call that out. That big thank you again to our patrons, but also big thank you to everyone who is listening and reach out to us. We're part of the community too.
Hell yeah. Yes.
Tim, are you a patron? I don't think you're a patron, Tim.
Dude, I don't have money.
Okay. See, that's and I realized that there was an error in the mailing list sign up process. So if you signed up for the mailing list and didn't get any emails for our newsletter, sorry, you should be getting them now. And if you never signed up, please go sign up. If you enjoy me and Tim's beautiful voices, you'll enjoy our beautiful writing as well, and pro tips straight to the inbox and other cool stuff. And yeah, that's all. That's all my announcements. A big thank you to everyone who left new reviews. And if you haven't left a review, please leave it. Really helps us grow the show. And then Tim, I've got unless you have an announcement. Tim, do you want to announce anything? No. Okay. Just shaking the head. All right, Tim, I got a pro tip that has nothing to do with anything we're talking about today, but here it is. I really think when it comes to shoe choice, you need to start understanding your shoes better. And what I mean by that is that just period. But we did do a podcast a little bit on footwork and shoe choice. And I don't know, this may be something we dive into again at a later date, but people have their favorite shoes. I really like Solutions and Comp Solutions, and they're not that different. And in some ways you could just put on a shoe and just be like, this is my favorite shoe. And it's like, yeah, that's a great shoe. That Scarpa is a great shoe. That whatever it is, that 510, I used to love Dragons, but you have to understand what they do and why they excel at the thing they excel. And the example I'll use is, I'd say stiffness in some ways is like the first biggest factor in shoes. So the reason why I have Solutions and Comp Solutions is that the toe box is the same. So, where the front point is, just that whole construction is the same, but then the midsole is different. And the midsole on the normal Solution is really hard. So it makes the whole entire shoe stiffer. So if you're going to climb a slab, you want to be in solutions, not comp solutions. Now, I'm not saying you couldn't use comp solutions to climb on the slab. I'm just telling you that you need to understand why you have different shoes in your quiver and then use them appropriately. And I love the comp solutions. The heel is better. There's rubber for a toe hook that I think is better. I wonder if the compound might be a little softer for stickiness, but basically different shoes have different different results coming out of them. So
Man,
anyways,
that's a good
yeah.
pro tip. We almost did a shoe podcast, like just talking about all of the climbing shoes, like a long time, like a year ago, I feel like.
They're important. Shoes are freaking
Yeah.
important.
But that we didn't do it because I thought it's just so complex. It is subjective. It's really complex to talk about these types of things. We may do it, but I like what you're saying. It's almost extremely obvious that like shoes are different for different tasks, but so obvious to the point where people don't take the time to learn the depth themselves. And that's a huge mistake. Like I think the very first thing I did when I was brand new is I got I got a bunch of different types of shoes when I started. I think I bought used rentals that had holes in them for $15 at Planet Granite, and I went to like my friend's Anasazis, the Anasazi VCSs, and I got a pair of teams for free with 510 teams, and I got a pair of Futuras, and I got a bunch of different shoes, and man, you learn so much over time. And luckily, I'm at a place now where I can get free shoes, and now all I'm doing is trying every possible shoe I can. Still, I'm still doing that. And yeah, obviously I have a solution and a solution comp. I have a theory and a mantra and a different shoe for different things, but it's not for different angles. It's not for different holes necessarily. It's for different tasks. It's for different movements. And I know myself so much better now just because of trying different shoes. So what a good pro tip, man. And you're not going to know unless you try. You're really not going to know unless you just put on different shoes. So go to shoe demos, try to get discounts for different things, and don't be afraid to pull the trigger if you're like curious about a shoe that you've heard is good. The only reason you're going to be disappointed probably is the shape of the shoe. It's the only reason you're going to be disappointed. You're going to be surprised, and you may learn preferences over time, but to be honest, you're not going to be disappointed by many shoes. You're just gonna be like, I don't really like that as much for this type of thing, but it will be good for something else.
I have seen people climb V14 and just terrible, terrible cheap shoes.
Yeah,
So,
right.
and I'm not going to name, there's a pro that we had him on the podcast. So if you want to do the research, you can, who I don't want to say they're famous for they have just jumped around from shoe sponsor to shoe sponsor, and they will just crush wearing anything. And so, there is kind of like, this is the nuance we always try to bring is there. In some ways you can climb well in any shoe, but I have a hunch that even within each of those brands, each that they find the task for each shoe. And just the super quick high level is, stiffer shoes are going to be better on smaller footholds, like, little pebbles on vertical granite. You want something stiffer. And if you're talking about big slopey volumes indoors, you're going to want something softer and with stickier rubber. And, and then there's downturn versus flat. Like you said, really complex, but that's just the super high level. The shoe choice 101 is if you're on something vertical and you're wearing, and it's a slab with just tiny little edges, like granite edges, probably don't want moccasins, like really soft slippers. Probably would love to have TC Pros or something that really board stiff. Yeah. Anyways, all right. That's my pro tip. There you go.
Nice. Okay, my pro tip also doesn't have to do as much with the topic of the day, but it's a pro tip. Okay, I'm going to read this thing that I wrote. Even though we talk a lot about making use of time well when you're busy, sometimes the optimal approach to progressing in climbing means to cram more days together. Climbing, what kind of idiot wrote this? I'm just kidding. Climbing multiple days in a row, or more specifically, not planning rest days out, can be tricky and even a bit scary, but there's a lot to learn from multiple days on if you're careful about it. Embrace technical climbing and self-talk on these days. You probably won't feel the best, but try to surprise yourself with what you can get done. Just be conservative on the full crimps, double gas stones, iron crosses, and heavy latching. If you aren't on, okay, this is the real pro tip here. So basically what I was saying was, you can try to climb more days in a row and you may learn a lot. You don't have to feel the best every time, but here's the big caveat for it. If you aren't on a specific training plan, or yours isn't going so well and you have to deviate, for example, if you're on trips, you have an 8 week long plan, and 2 weeks in you're like, I have to go on this thing or whatever, and your training plan already goes to shit. Then you have to adjust to it. You have to deviate. And so this is another way you can deviate, especially if you're going to miss a couple of days and you want to cram more days together. if you know you need to work on, and this is more for yourself as a climber, if you know you need to work on technical and mental things over physical things in climbing, and that's almost everybody, consider scrapping the cycle and just going climbing multiple days in a row for multiple weeks on end with some littered rest. And so that's not to say that you just climb every day for forever, but there's a lot to gain from climbing multiple days on. There's the, if you find yourself trying to structure climbing sessions all of the time, you're probably missing out on a ton, right? And we've had so many sessions where like we'll just be 6 hours, 8 hours deep, and it's like, oh, I gotta try one more time, like obviously that's not
And then you
planned
do it
out,
sometimes too.
and
You're
sometimes
like,
you
oh, I'm
do
so
it.
wrecked. How come I
Oh,
did it? Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. I know Josh really feels about this pro tip is good, but there's a big caveat there because it can be dangerous and it can be super. You have to be really careful about it. So I just wanted to
Well,
say that as well.
okay, I think one of the things I really take from that too is it reminds me of that Q&A we did last time where someone said, hey, should I go climb with the strong crew? Like,
Mm.
Tim made me this crappy training plan, but should I follow it or should I go climb with the strong crew? And my advice was go climb with
Go
that
climb with the
freaking strong
stronger.
crew. And the reason why there's a similar analogy there is that, look, yes, you're busy. Yes, you say, okay, I'm going to do limit bouldering on this day, endurance on this day, weightlifting on this day. And that's like just this thing that you see all the time on Instagram, right? Like you need to structure your things, but you guys like that's just not always the approach to climbing. Like when you are in love with something, you just like, oh my God, now my meeting got canceled. I'm gonna go climbing. Oh, this is your third day on? Yeah, but my meeting got canceled. I can go climbing. And you know, maybe there's a time and a place for structure. Maybe you're trying to get from V15 to V16. Maybe you really need to find that structure. Maybe, I don't know. But I'll tell you what, a lot of people just do is they just go climbing and they go climbing a lot and they're paying attention. And so I'm just going to liken it to that question we had where don't be so rigid. Like just get out there and climb but
Yeah.
yeah, be careful. I like what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, be rigid about specific things. Here's the high level nuance. Understand what curriculum is absolutely core to your climbing growth, right? Like it's probably not the hangboard. It's probably not the campus board. It's probably not even board climbing at all. It's a lot of movement. It's a lot of nuance, a lot of technical things. It's a lot of like, so there are specific techniques like heel hooking, toe hooking, drop knees, and, latching dead point. There's a lot of very, very fundamental techniques that you can work on constantly that don't have to cost you a lot of intensity, don't have to cost you a lot of physical things. Therefore, you probably can climb every day. You probably can climb every day, but you probably won't simply because of how much you are supplementing. And so supplementation, understand that supplementation is just supplementation. It's an addition to, rounding out your climbing curriculum, right? So weightlifting, hangboarding, board climbing, it's all supplementation to the climbing that you want to have. For someone like
Supplementation.
Josh, he's not going to gain that much just from climbing on gym climbs, simply because he may need the intensity. He's so good that he can cheat through all these things with good technique that in order to actually, he needs to supplement the board. He may need smaller holes. He may need more aggressive moves. He may need more intense technical tests, right? But you may not at certain times in your day. And Josh may not do that his third day on if he wanted to climb 3 days on because he can't go climbing for the next week. There's so many different scenarios and so many different
Although
situations where you can.
if Jimmy showed up and was like, hey Josh, you want a session on the kilter board? You're
Right.
like, I'm 3 days on, I'm wrecked. So yes, definitely. That's exactly
Yeah.
what I want to do.
You got to show up.
Yeah.
You got to show up that day and understand like where you should be and how you should get there, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is one of my things just about there's an element of continuing to build work capacity and volume so that you can just go and climb more and do more moves at your limit. I don't know if you remember Will Englund talking about Daniel Woods and just how high a work capacity he had so he could try hard often on hard climbs, and there's just it kind of stacks. But okay, I got a little pro tip part 2 there for that. So I'm normally not a big fan of taking pain medication like Tylenol. I'm actually allergic to aspirin, but
What?
yeah, do not give me aspirin. No, dude, it's called NSAIDs, non-steroidal. Anyway, it's not weird, Tim. It's common.
Sorry.
Stop making fun of me. You're the one wearing glasses. It's all right. I've got contacts on. What was I think? Yeah. Okay. So if you're sore, don't take drugs. Like that's
Mm,
not the answer to being sore. But sometimes when I'm second day on at a really sharp place like the buttermilks and my skin is wrecked, but I need to climb because I want to climb because I'm in the buttermilks, I will take Tylenol to kind of like dull the pain because, like you're saying, yeah, I don't know, watch out for certain types of things. And when you're really multi days on, it just reminded me of this one thing. I'm like, God, that is a trick. I don't know if that's a trick. It's just the one time where I will take pain medication before climbing, or even just, I think pain medication is just a bad call. Like if your knees hurt or something, like that's because they hurt and you shouldn't just take drugs to go walk a bunch or do drop knees or something. But that's my little tip. Second day, maybe specifically for the buttermilks too. Like your
yeah.
second day on the
Well,
buttermilks, maybe some Tylenol.
the significance to what you're saying, which is awesome, is basically that skin pain is not a limiting factor to your sessions. That shouldn't be. But maybe joint pain, tendon pain, like ligament pain that maybe may lead to a
Yeah.
more chronic injury, that's not pain that you want to, kind of quiet. But if you can take aspirin or ibuprofen or whatever to hide or kind of maybe get your mind away from the skin pain, that's a really good thing because that's not a good limiting factor for your session. But a lot of people don't have the foundational tendon strength, the workload capacity like Daniel Woods does, or like yourself or myself might have. And so learn yourself, learn what work capacity you do have, and then try to separate the work capacity pains versus the skin pains, because skin pain will be there pretty quickly. That's usually not a good way to stop your sessions. You can go and slab climb, you can go and do lots of weird movements. You can, if you have jug rash pain, you can start grabbing more crimps. If you have, I literally change the hold that I grab day to day in the gym based on the pain of the skin, because I can do so many moves with my body. Like my body can pull so much, but my skin can't handle that much.
God, isn't
So
climbing
as much as my
fun?
pulling.
Just dealing with skin pain. That's really fun. Yeah.
Yes,
Dude,
it's fun.
yeah, I love this. It cracked me up thinking about buttermilks and skin pain. And then I went to Kalymnos and it's just like land of overhung 2-foot jugs. And I had palm pain. Like it's like every hold was, I mean, that's like jug rash, like you're talking about. It was so weird that my palms were raw. I was like, what
And then
is
wouldn't
this?
you transition to like pinching them a little bit more shallow, where you're like, oh, dude, my
Yeah.
palms hurt
Yeah.
so bad. I'm just going to change how I grip this hold, right?
I mean, it's just, it also just doesn't really stop you as much as when your fingertips are raw and bleeding. It's different than
Yeah,
when
yeah,
your palms are tender. Like, I don't know. It's
yeah,
just, but yeah, you're right. You can kind of adjust. All right,
yeah.
Tim,
Cool.
way off on the deep end. We went from buttermilks to Kalymnos and into drugs. So clearly what we're going to talk about next is flashing. Yeah, we kind of led up to a bit, but Tim, you want to talk about flashing boulders today? And on when you first brought it up, I think I was like, yeah, I mean, yeah, I like flashing boulders. Yeah, it's cool. Like I like the yellow check mark next to the climb is better than the red one. Yes, I got you, Tim. But as we started going into a little bit more, I thought it was really interesting. And so I just wanted to start out by saying, yeah, what is about flashing that you think is interesting, and like why do we care about it so much, and why is it separate from red pointing? Like it feels very separate. It's not the same thing. So yeah, let's
Yeah.
start there, Tim.
Well, a couple of points there. Yeah, I mean, I brought it up because Michaela, my girlfriend, brought up. She was like, "You guys should talk about flashing because I mentioned like Spectre being flashed a couple of times, and she's like, "Yeah, why is that so hard?" I was like, "Because it took me 1,000 tries. That's why." And it wasn't necessarily like just a personal thing. It showed me and her like the significance of flashing something at that specific style or that specific difficulty can show you how good a climbing attempt can be, not necessarily just the climber itself, but how good a climbing attempt can be. And we should be able to look at a climbing attempt and decide if it was objectively good or bad. And flashing is really a good way to look at it. Flashing something like Spectre takes so much nuance. There's so much climbing movement on there. There's not that much climbing movement on the climb, but there's, so many little nuances of those climbing movements that you almost never see in climbing gyms. You almost never see them on other rock, especially. And so to show up to that climb, really understand what it might take, and then flash it was just mind-boggling to me. And Brian Nugent, your buddy, would you guys call him Stick?
Yeah, I
Was
don't.
that his nickname?
Yeah, I was like, how do you pronounce his last name? What is this for? He's just Stick. I'm not super tight with him. I've spent some time climbing with him, and I think I met him right after he flashed Spectre, and so I just thought he was a god. I just thought
Hmm.
this
Me
is
too.
Stick. This
Yeah.
Stick the god. Yes, he flashed Spectre. I
I mean,
know of that man.
like, yeah, I have a story. I won't go into it, but basically the significance of flashing. That was the note that I wrote for this whole podcast, is the significance of flashing. It's not necessarily to talk just about flashing or how to do it or anything. It's just the significance of it, because it can show a lot more than you think, or it shows a lot more than I think climbers appreciate. And that's kind of why I guess I picked on like Katie's thing, because yeah, Katie, there's nothing wrong with Katie or how she thinks about climbing, but I think what I beef with a lot of high level climbers is that a lot of high level climbers tend to not put that much highlight on flashing. They tend to not talk about it in a way where they like it. And so why don't we like it very much? Maybe we should start liking it, and maybe it should be more
Well,
accepted and okay as a
yeah, and
challenge.
I just want to point out what the significance is. Like you said, there's some significance, and so there's two things that really stood out to me when we chatted. There is something about certain boulders being flashed that says something about that boulder in that grade. So Spectre is, we'll just say V13, and just give it that blanket grade, whether it's, whichever way it's done. I don't know, whatever, it doesn't matter. V13 has been flashed quite a bit. In fact, freaking Jimmy Webb has flashed, well, he's flashed a lot of V13s, but not only that, he flash F8 of V13 up here in Tahoe, which always blows my mind.
Awesome.
But I guess the point is why, and I think we should dig into Spectre because it's really an interesting one, is it says there's something about the boulder that is more significant when it cannot or can be flashed easily. And so it gives you something to understand about the climb more than the grade. So there's a significance there. And then
It's really good.
and so then the corollary there is it says something about the climber too. So if you're the kind
Mm-hmm.
of climber that flashes X type of boulders versus Y type of boulders, it just says something about there's a significance there in who that climber is and how they perform on the wall that is
Yeah.
more than just the grade.
I'm really glad that you brought that up. And I wrote this, the first paragraph I wrote in my notes is sending a climb, just sending a climb doesn't necessarily mean, it doesn't necessarily mean you executed perfect technique. The perfect technique for the climb, for the move, is kind of what you were saying about this high foot, is like, okay, that may have been the perfect thing, but let's say you weren't there with your friend, you would have done it a different way. You would have, but doesn't necessarily mean that was the perfect technique. And I said, sending a climb doesn't necessarily mean you executed perfect technique with ideal efficiency on each movement of a climb. In fact, that rarely happens in climbing without tons and tons of solving and rehearsal. And I wrote in parentheses here, Josh and I had to talk about this, and the story that you brought up was this dyno that you were trying in saddle boulders, and you did it like 20th try, right?
No, I didn't. I didn't do it. I didn't do it.
Oh, you didn't do it.
I didn't do it.
You were talking about your tries felt better and better.
Yeah, well, I got really close, but
Oh, okay.
didn't
So
you
you
see my
didn't.
Instagram where I like tickled the
Yeah. I
very
thought
tip of it?
you brought that up. I thought you said you did it, but anyway.
How embarrassing. Can we edit it and just make it sound like I did it? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, might as well.
Okay.
Basically, the point from there, though, regardless if you do it or not, the point that you brought up on the phone call was that you got closer and closer, and you just started to understand how to put power and the timing and specific things more and more over time. And you were surprised at how easy it felt by like your 20th try to do those things that you thought were really complicated in your first try. And my point was, I was like, yeah, and you could have done that your first try. You could have found that 20th try in your first try if you just paid attention to those things, right?
Yep.
And so basically, I said it could have felt even easier the first try with the ideal prep performance mixture. And I guess I kind of wrote a big note on what this prep performance formula is, and we can go into it in a second. But basically, I wrote that the prep performance formula is unique to everyone, but should always be paid attention to and worked on. It's not something that is just a formula. It's a constantly dynamic formula for everybody, for themselves, because it is contingent on what you already understand or how you feel about certain movements or positions or holds or anything like that, or the grade. This allows more ideal attempts, whether they come on the first try or not. There may be a deep importance associated with flashing or even doing things quickly, but everyone would probably like to do things that they climb near their potential faster if they could. I also wrote here that flashing, and in parentheses, because this is also really important, a climb that is near or at maximum limit climbing usually only happens when a special mixture of sequencing, visualization, commitment, smart adaptations, effort, and focus exist. And I kind of we did a whole podcast on sequencing, and we talk a lot about effort and focus, but I wrote a couple of notes about visualization, commitment, smart adaptations. But before I go into those, I guess, yeah,
Yeah.
what do you think?
So it's actually kind of interesting to talk about the thing I was just on, and it's this dyno called Huge. It's on the saddle boulder. It's on the left side. It gets V8, but it's hard. It's hard. And I mean, this was my first time ever on it, and I came extremely close, like tickled the jug. And it's kind of an obvious start to an obvious finish. It's just a dyno. And what's interesting is that I used the same feet the whole time. So my first go, I just kind of half-ass it, and I'm like 8 inches below. And then it kind of reminded me of my description of Loscott, where I kept refining, okay, I got to really jump. Okay, I got to pull in and jump. Okay, I need to go off of my left foot onto my right foot and jump. Okay, I need to do a little bit of swing before to kind of make it easier so I get all the way up, and I need to really jump. But what's funny is you're talking about commitment and flashing, and no, I didn't do that climb, but the reason why I think you might have gotten mixed up is that I did that analogy to Loscott, and how then when you actually put all those things together, you just dunk it, and you're like, oh my god, what was I doing? I when I did that, I was like 6 inches above. And so what I hear from your description of those different attributes, it does make me think, okay, why didn't I do it all on that first try? I did not commit. I just was kind of feeling it out. All those things that I just listed are lessons that I have learned before, and I knew how to implement. It wasn't like I didn't understand that you have to pull in, or that you have to really jump, or any of that. And just it is interesting to me now, thinking about showing up for that first attempt and really putting it all into it. And what I find is interesting is that sometimes when you try to flash, you really commit, and you often will. I will often do some of my best technique on a flash go because I'm so committed. And now I could have read it wrong, and or I could just fail for another reason. But it is interesting, that commitment piece is really important, really important.
I think I think the commitment piece is important, but because commitment is hard, if you don't understand what you're doing, and I think that understanding what you're doing is actually the more significant thing. I'm thinking about this from uh, everything you're just talking about. This dyno huge made me think about competitions. So competition climbers will often tell you, or a lot of comp setters will even tell you, like, you'd be surprised how easy those climbs actually are in competitions, right? So why do they say this? Because they're complex, they're hard to commit to, they're hard to know how to do them, they're hard. And so what a route setter is doing in competition is they're finding all the things that you may know about climbing and challenging it. They do slots, dual techs, turnaround, paddle dynos. They add coordination after coordination after coordination. They went so far down coordination that everyone's getting pissed off. It's like, why are you doing that? It's like, well, we don't know how to make you guys fall anymore, because we can get Daniel Woods to flash up to like V14 probably on a specific style if we really wanted him to, and that could be hard. But what about challenging to flash, right? And so I think that they don't even know that necessarily it's going on, because clearly it was shown in, well, we're just going to do coordination until, so that's my read on why parkour existed so much in a meta for such a long time. Because when route setters think about challenging a climber or getting them to fall, they get them confused. They get them not committed, right? It's not the difficulty of the climb, it's how difficult it is to do quickly,
I
right?
totally agree with that analysis. And just before you go on, something I think is really interesting is just like it's really easy for us to imagine Daniel Woods just basically flashing V14, especially on plastic with holds he knows consistently. What's interesting is you have people like Tamoa or Yanya who actually seem to just kind of, now that they've learned that coordination game, it's almost kind of like really easy for them too. It's just kind of an interesting side note.
Also, an interesting side note, Daniel wasn't really like this, but almost everybody who was competing in like Daniel's era or was really good at that style begun to hate the new meta, right? And it's easy to hate the new meta when you think it's not tested on specific things. And I also hated the new meta for a long time, because not because I was good at the other style, but just because I missed being tested on that style as much. But that just goes to show you a lot. Like, what are they getting frustrated about, right? Like, they're not asking themselves, what is this comp testing you on then, right? Because obviously the comp's not testing you in climbing anymore. It's testing you on your ability to climb something quickly. It's testing your ability to commit to a climb that you will never know how to do, right? And that's why I coach so specifically rock climbers differently than I coach comp climbers, because comp climbers need to know how to flash things. Rock climbers don't. They just need to know how to solve. But you need to know how to do a bit of both to climb well, period. I think that's why I think the significance of flashing is so important to talk about. But it is interesting to just talk about it in the realm of dynos or coordination or weird slabs and stuff that you don't understand, stuff that you feel insecure in, stuff that you question your ability to commit. I think that is significant.
So I really want to talk about Spectre, because it was when we talked about flashing, just it really popped into my head as a really interesting boulder, because it has that quality of, this is a hard boulder and this is one that does not get flashed very often, and it seems like something that is unlikely to be flashed as much as other climbs of a similar difficulty in Bishop. And so Spectre kind of historically revolved around this big move to a left hand that you had to keep what do you call it, like a toe jam, Tim? I don't know. It's like a toe.
Yeah, you like shove your toe sideways, or people use just a barefoot or a heel hook now.
Yeah, you can even use a barefoot. It's just kind of like you have a very big, precise move that requires extreme body tension on either a toe jam, heel hook, wedge toe, wherever you choose, that is a little bit tenuous. And the point there is that not only is it physically a difficult move, and it's really at a limit reach, or at least it's really, really, really limit reach for me, but it's very technical and requires precision. And so it was really impressive when Stick did that. It just really blew me away. And when Brian did that, before Carlo had come around and pioneered a different way to do Spectre, where he jumped and cut feet to that hold, which is difficult in its own right. I mean, clearly difficult, and it requires a very different type of dead point ability, but there's a lot more strength involved there. It's more like a moonboard problem, which is one of the reasons why Ravioli Biceps did it not that long ago and did it quickly.
Yeah.
And so, the question I have for you, or what I think is fun to explore there, is Shawn Raboutou flashed it in a way that is potentially physically harder. Now Shawn's on the shorter side, so he's actually physically incapable of doing what was the classic beta that Dave Graham put it up with, and the way Brian Nugent Stick flashed it. So, a lot of people have logged that Spectre send with the jump move where your feet cut as 14. Brian
or 15.
Really? Who logged as 15?
Mm-hmm. I think in the beginning it was kind of just granted given at 15. I'm just going to say that. Yeah.
Well, so you have these two different flashes. You have Shawn doing it that very physical way, and Brian doing it a very technical way. It's still physical, and also the jump move is still technical. Like, these are all on the ends of a spectrum where we're just saying, like, one is more physical. And so what does that say about the boulder, and which flash is more impressive?
Dude, I love how hard this question is to bring up. Like, I love how you have to bring caveat after caveat, because it's like no, but Shawn's way is technical too. But it's like, okay, I get what you're saying. I did Spectre. It took me about 7 years. 7 years of going just back and forth.
Didn't flash. You're saying you did not flash it. Yeah, 7 years.
It depends
okay.
on your definite. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I did not flash it.
Flash
no.
it? Yeah. Okay.
No, I did not. Took
Did
me
you
a long
gear
time.
flash it? Yeah.
Took me no, it did not. It took me 4 hours the day I sent it. I have a post on it. You can find it on my Instagram. It took me a long time. It was also the very first climb I actually got obsessed on. It was very first year climbing. I saw a picture of it and I wanted to do it, and I didn't know where it was. I didn't know how hard it was. I didn't care. And then I saw dosage shortly after, and I was like, I'm going to go do this climb. It happened to be in Bishop, and I started trying it pretty much my first time in Bishop. And basically, I just got addicted to doing this. You're right. You explained the move decently well, but I think the difficulty of the climb that you're not pointing out is that all the holds face the same way. Not only is it hard to keep far tension, and it's hard to drive with your feet in that position, with your arms in that position. It's hard to get distance, and the distance is very far for the move. Not only is the distance far, if you get it too much, the foot's going to come off. If the foot doesn't stay on, you're probably going to swing off the holds because they're both facing the same direction. If they're both facing backwards and you're coming out backwards, you're going to fall off the holds.
It's steep. Yeah.
If you're strong, really strong, much stronger than the climb, you can do it Shawn's way. And that's just been proven over and over again. It's why they call it 14 or 15, because it really is V13 if you nail this more precise method. But it's just harder. It's more physically difficult at a high, and maybe even more technically difficult, but it's not technical components that keep you on the wall. It's the strength and the technique usage that gets you doing a move that's much, much harder. But that just means that the components of that movement are less volatile, right? So I think Spectre is just one of the most volatile climbs you can do because it's very hard to control those things. It takes a lot of timing and coordination and knowing those things, which you can do first try, but it's super unlikely you're going to see someone do that. There's more people in the world who are capable of doing it Brian Nugent's stick way, my way, Dave Graham way. There's more people who are capable of doing it that way. There's far less people who are capable of doing it Shawn's way. But the people who are capable of doing it Shawn's way will probably do it faster. I think that's a good way of just sharing the Spectre analysis.
That's so cool what you just said. What you just said is that there's more people physically capable of doing it Brian's way, the kind of classic way. And there's fewer people who are capable of doing it Shawn's way. But what I heard from that, maybe you can correct me if I heard it wrong, is that you would argue that it's more likely that we will see more flashes Shawn's way, despite it being more physically difficult than the way Brian flashed it.
Yes.
And that's, I mean, this is why it's an interesting topic that you brought up, is there's more to flashing than the great. It's
yes.
this kind of insider
style
knowledge. Yeah.
It's a style. It's a type of movement. It's volatility, right? So when we as climbers,
volatility, I love that.
It's volatility. So setters nowadays are increasing volatility by how? Dual techs, blocking holds, like putting holds that you have never seen before. Of course, that increases volatility, right? Movements that you cannot do slowly. If you can't do movements slowly, you lose a lot of precision, right? And so jumping to this Spectre hold, you're jumping, if you know Spectre, it's hard to explain it without you trying it. But if you ever go and try Spectre, you're going to realize that it's a crystal fest, dude. Like you grab this huge rail that's a jug, the way that you grab it. The first move is probably like V6 just to stick this first hold, and it's 3 holds, and then you do this like really long top out. But basically the climb is like 3 holds. You start on this big block jug, you do a big move to a ledge, you cam your foot in, you match this ledge, and how you hold this ledge is really important. It's very spike dependent. All people grab it very differently. It's just very dependent on what do you want out of the hold, what do you want out of the move, right? What do you need out of the move based on your body type, based on your strength? It's a really interesting climb. But then you do this long reach to a blind hold, and it really matters that you get this spike. If your index finger doesn't hit spike, you probably won't hold swing, period. I've tried this move so many times now that I just know that for me, at least my physical capabilities, I was never holding the swing unless I hit the spike perfectly, right? What you can do though, if your feet come on, or if your feet stay on, is you can hit the hold anywhere and then move to the spike. That's a really significant thing about jumping to the hold and not jumping to the hold. The difference is though, is that when they're really strong, they can crimp this or pinch this ledge and almost do it like the way that they jump to the hold is almost slower. Actually, it is slower than us going to it with our feet on. Super interesting, but that increases volatility. Speed of which you go to a hold is going to increase volatility. Where your feet are and how you can use your feet is going to increase volatility, right? So yes, strength can decrease volatility, which is what I'm saying about Shawn and certain things, or certain techniques can also decrease volatility, but only to a certain point. So flashing Spectre at any grade for me, I want to say this or at any style is always going to be impressive. The flashing at Shawn's way is less impressive than Brian Nugent's way because of the volatility factors.
Damn, that was good. That was an interesting little way to end that statement. I was trying to think of something that's difficult in the buttermilks that is easier to get flashed and has less volatility. And what I thought of was Blood Meridian, or is it Social Distortion? I never know. So this is the drop off to the process, which is the V16 on the Grandpa Peabody, and it's this super thin crimp climb that you can see all the holes. It's just they're right there, right in front of you, and very straightforward. There's not a lot of ways to do it. That's not true. There's a few ways that you can do it. And also, I've never even pulled on, so take what I say with a grain of salt. But I know it's been flashed multiple times. It may be V12 and not V13, but the point is it's a very hard boulder that it's kind of got this, can you crimp? Can you crimp on these holds? Oh, you can? Okay, then just do it. Like, it actually makes me think of some of the first, what I would call harder climb that I flashed was Diaphanous Sea, which is like V11 in Waco. And to me, I just remember I'm grabbing the holds. I'm just like, okay, these holds are good. Okay, what it's all about is going from this hold to this kind of jug or juggier hold, that's what the climb is made up of. Okay, like either I can do this or I can't, and there's something very different about that than when I've played around Spectre. And to give people an idea of how big this move is, I'm 5'9.5", 5'9". Maybe if I was still dating, I'd try to
I'm
tell you I'm
5'11".
5'10". And I've got like a +3 or so. I have a 6-foot wingspan, and my legs are really long too. So often, even though it may not seem like it, actually, if your legs are long compared to your torso, it actually kind of gives you extra length in this way that I'm not going to try to figure out on air. But if I do the heel hook method, when I get to the hold, I am so spanned out between my heel and my arm that I cannot move. I cannot, and I'm good at moving at full extension. It's kind of one of my things. And I literally cannot undo my heel or move a toe. Like that's how big that move is. And so the idea of hitting something at full span, dynamic, that edge is good, but it's good in the sense like, when you talk to guys like Tim, we're like, yo, it's pretty good. You're like, yeah, it's a jug. It's like a, I don't know what size is. It's a decent hold, but you're also at, I don't know, 50 degrees. And so that volatility really says something about that climb. And I just love that you use
Yeah.
that word volatility. That really was a light bulb for me when you're
Mm-hmm.
describing the differences.
The heel also decreases a lot of volatility of the movement to go to the ledge, but it makes the cut way harder, or makes moving the foot out way harder. And I saw Ross do this heel way, and it looks so easy for him because he's about 6'6" with the plus, and it just looks so easy to like keep this heel on and cam. And I have no problem saying I think Spectre is easier for him than a lot of other people. Height unfortunately will take away certain metrics in certain places, and it's okay. Like Blood Meridian, you're right, is still V13. Some people will call it V12. I would call it V13 because it's straightforward, pure metrics. But there's something like Spectre, it's also V13. But Jimmy spent a couple of sessions on Spectre and could probably right now easily
How
walk up Blood
embarrassing.
Meridian almost in like warm up. But I actually haven't seen anybody do Spectre in a single session. Like other than people who flashed it. It is a climb that even climbers who climb V15 will show up to Spectre and spend a lot of tries on it, because of all these volatility factors. And yeah, you're right. Blood Meridian is such a good climb to bring up. And this also brings up like my personal philosophies in Bishop, and like why I was obsessed in Bishop and highballing, and like why I really was obsessed with highballing, because I really believed in this, proving climbing well on a certain style of climbing like Bishop mattered a lot to me. I really saw the difference between Blood Meridian and Buttermilker and Mandala and Spectre in the Swarm, and I was like, these are all these hard Testpiece climbs in the 12 to 14 range in Bishop. I was like, this is so interesting. Like some of them I feel like they're going to come to me way quicker, or almost a repeatable first try like Buttermilker, where I'm like, I don't know, Blood Meridian feels very hard to me still, like because I don't have strong fingers, right? But the movements are almost black and white to me, like almost black and white, like
Didn't
I'm either going to do them or not.
Ethan Pringle said that Blood Meridian was like V15. He was like, V13, right. That thing's like V15 to me. Yeah, it shows.
Right. And you have climbers who disagree on extreme ends, and that's why grades will always be a tough thing, because this volatility factor.
I'm going to save your tactics for the next question, just because I do think tactics are interesting, and you have a lot of experience through your competition days. And I think when we talk about tactics, it's going to apply to indoor climbing, outdoor climbing competitions. But I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the ethics of flashing. So you were chatting a bit about this with Eric Jerome, and it's just interesting, like what constitutes a flash, and it made me think of the moon board. Actually, it made me think of two very different things. This one climb, or actually, yeah. Well, so on the moon board, I take the flashes seriously. You get extra points, but I've grabbed all the holds before. Like if I warm up and I grab the holds, like how's that influence it? And then maybe even more importantly is I know when I can keep my foot on or not, because it's gridded. I know I can keep my foot on whatever, row based on where the hold is, because I've done it so many times. Even if that foot and that hand are different, I just know that my body can fit. So it tells me something about how that move's going to go. Can I actually reach it tipped out, or can I not? And then, because we're talking about flashing and not necessarily on-sighting, I thought about this thing that I did in Rocklands called the Arc, and I did it first out of my crew. Like I was the one who ventured up it, and it was really tall, and I felt like it was an on-site, like I knew nothing about the climb. I did not climb to the top, and it was scary. It's kind of tall with a bad landing, and it gets 11. I don't know if it's actually 11. Who knows when you flash something and you're on-sighting, if what the grade is really. It's definitely soft. But my point is the vast difference there, right? Like, which one, what do we think about ethics and flashing? And yeah, like those are very different flashes,
Yeah,
very
it's a
different.
really good question. I really love that Eric brought that up. And his question was more so, can you touch all the holds from the ground? Like, how much can you touch the holds without putting weight on them?
Mm.
And basically that was his question. And you bring up the moon board, which is super interesting, right? Because you will eventually grab almost every single hold, if not every single hold. So are you really flashing boulders if you're grabbing every single hold? And I do have an answer for this, and I actually feel like the answer is yes, of course. Like, we obviously we will still credit flashes on those things. We've never felt like that, and there's a reason for that. And I think that's the difference between on-sighting and flashing. But I wrote these different attributes for what I think require a good flash, right? Sequencing, visualization, commitment, smart adaptations, effort, and focus. Sequencing is the only one that I think you can negate by having that previous information, right? Information of how even people can tell you exactly how to do a move and it still constitutes as a flash, right? People can even show you the moves. People can even show you like, yeah, I could just do it like this, you see, but I can't do it like this. I still count that as a flash because
Definitely.
all the other factors other than sequencing have to do with your choices on the wall on that one attempt, and or your willingness or your mindset on that attempt. It's just exclusive to once you pull on. And I think that really highlights an important aspect of climbing, which is prep and performance, right? If you can negate a lot of the prep, that's great. You're going to have an easier time flashing something. But the performance side of it is really the significance of the flash, right? It's just how confident are you? How committed are you? How adaptive are you? How much effort are you willing to put in? How much focus do you have on the wall in that moment? Sequencing matters, but like that's not the point. The point isn't do you know how to solve the climb? That's a given. If you could have the information, then you can. That's the difference between on-sighting and flashing is the information. On-sighting, you are not allowed to know that stuff, right?
Okay.
That there's a clear etiquette there. There's a clear ethic for on-sighting, right?
This is awesome. You really, as you were, well, first of all, I think it's cool how you weaved the ethics and tactics into each other. And you said that, you could only solve one of those issues, that bullet list you had around flashing. And it now hearing you talk about what flashing really is, I actually am going to side with that argument that you can kind of weight all the holds in a lot. You could inspect it on a rope. You can feel, some positions, and you could basically, because the idea is that you do have beta, right? Like that is what a flash is versus an on-site. You do have beta. And so, I'm not going to name names because I don't want anyone to, I don't know, judge these
Mm-hmm.
climbers, whoever, but there were people who made arguments that, yeah, you really could, inspect, basically do almost everything except for pull on. And now hearing you talk about that, I actually am in that camp where before I think I was a little like, are you getting up on a ladder and fondling everything and, wrapping down and ticking and checking? I was like, I don't know, that seems kind of weird. But to
Yeah.
me, now that you say it, I get it. Flashing is more about that moment.
I think we just challenge those ethics too, though, because what I told Eric was I was like, I agree actually with you. I think it's the best answer is to say, it's kind of up to like your like what you say you're doing. Like that really is the most important thing. But
Yeah, well,
up
let's
until then,
say what Eric actually said, like that cheating, like.
yeah, exactly. I mean, cheating and lying and no, just you can say a lot about what you think, but
Oh, I'm
yeah,
going
I
to
guess
say it because
yeah,
I
you
thought
read
he
it.
put it so well. There's no cheating in climbing. There's only lying. So if
Mm-hmm.
you list out, if you say, I went down on a rope, I fondled every single hold, I had people climb it in front of me and try different betas that were the same size as me, explain it all, tick the different options, and then I did it first try. That's very
Mm-hmm.
different from saying, like, I flashed it. And, if you're not willing to share what you did, it's almost like it's not cheating, it's lying. Or, like,
Yeah.
anyways, I just thought
Yeah.
that was really cool that he put out that distinction.
Yeah. And my point there was that, I think people just hesitate to agree that you can inspect and touch things just because they think that, well, my assumption is that a lot of people think, because I have the same thought initially, I was like, ooh, that's a
Me
lot,
too.
right? That's a lot
Me
to be able
too.
to touch everything, but I guess I told Eric, I don't do that though, because I like that part of the game. Like I like mixing my on-sighting and flashing in my experience, but just know the difference. Flashing is a game that we play. It's one rule, one aspect of one version of a game that we play. And on-sighting is a different one. And if you're going to use those two at all, might as well understand the really deep rules of the game. And so flashing doesn't entail at all that you can know basically what you want. And just pulling onto or like going up. And I used to like the rule that we used to make was whatever pads you brought with you was all you could use to reach whatever holes you could have. That's the rule that we played by. But also, if you gave me another pad, I would go reach the next hole. And sometimes I'm like, give me another rock. Like I want to touch that. I'm really curious, like what that one's like, because I do want to have a really good performance go. If I care about performance, I care about the flash. If I care about my sequencing and my ability to find things on the wall my first try, that's an on-site, right? It's two totally different things that you're trying to test. And so I think based on that, the ethics and the rules of flashing, of course you can know almost anything. I want to be really careful saying that because people are going to make that law, I think. But
Yeah,
I think that's true.
well, you kind of, yeah, after talking it through, you kind of convinced me that really heavy inspection is okay in flashing,
Okay.
because I think this is one of the things that I think gets you so excited about flashing is it's this performance mentality. It's there's that connection to competition is what can I do on this try? Like how can I combine all of my climbing knowledge, all of my focus, all of my commitment into this moment? And that's a little bit less about that just distills it down to this moment versus on-sighting, which is adds another component of reading rock or reading the climb and not having any beta like that. That's in
Yeah.
flashing. It's almost like it's your goal is to have the perfect beta and then to have the best attempt as you see it. And yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. You changed
A
my mind.
slight,
Yeah.
nice. A slight side tangent. On our phone call originally, when we brought up flashing as a concept, I brought up this little story that happens a lot in climbing because I try to flash a lot of things, and this just happens to me a lot where I'll get really dedicated. And for me, my flash grade that I'm really stoked on trying to flash boulders is like in between V9 and V13. That's like anything that's in between V9 and V13, I probably will try to flash before I like session on it. But sometimes it's a climb and a performance attempt that I'm so proud of that if I happen to fall, I may not even pull on again. Like and yeah, everyone's not talking about. Like you go to the gym, be like, like this is that climb, and you'll have such a good read, such a good attempt, and your foot will just pick on like one dumb move and be like, like, and you'll get so over just trying the climb again because all you were interested in was the performance. And so I actually end up not trying some things again just because lethal design was the climb that I brought up to Michaela. Also, I was like, I saved this climb. Lethal Design's a long, crimpy V12 in Red Rocks. And I saved this climb for a flash for such a long time. I've watched so many people try this thing. I felt after the crux, and then my foot picked or my hand sweat on like one move. And I was like, damn, like I was so close to flashing that thing. And everyone's like, you still had like 2v7 sections after. I was like, okay, pulled straight back on and did the rest. And I was like, damn, like now I really know I could have flashed. And I've never pulled on that boulder again. Like, and I will, but it's been years. And like, I just want to point out, like, that's how much that performance aspect matters for flashing is like, sometimes the climb doesn't even matter. The send doesn't even matter. It's the performance.
Dude, I'm so like that. I hate when
Right.
I hate when I should have sent something. So here's my story around that is Pendragon is this V11 in Rocklands, and you do kind of a hard first move that requires you to cam your foot in, and it's really painful. Like you slot your foot in and then just lever against it. I mean, really painful on the top of your foot. But I was like, I want to flash this. I'm going to commit to that pain. So I just jam my foot in there, do the move, get through the section. And then what you do is you go feet first and you kick your toe onto these just, I don't even want to call them chicken heads. They're like, what's bigger than a chicken? Like a goose head. They're like huge. I mean, even I could bat hang off of it. And I'm no Ethan Pringle who can bat hang off of anything. And so I put my foot up, I'm on the toe hook, and then my hand just blows and I just fall off. And I was just like, no, I'm done. Like I already did the climb. And it was so hard for me to go and just wedge my foot in there and commit again to that pain. And I did get it done, but it was like it was a hate send, Tim. It was like a fine, stupid Pendragon. I'll just do
Yeah.
this climb again. And I did it,
It's
the
cool.
next
It's
try.
cool that you proved that you could do it and you decided to still do it. But yeah, it really just like you should listen to that one part of you that really just it was a hate send. You didn't enjoy it. Like what you did enjoy was the first thing, and it just made one mistake, and it was like, oh, dude, like that whole. But it's like it's not so much to say that's a bummer that you like didn't flash. It's just like, well, the flash was really important to you, and that doing it that try was significant, and good job for trying like doing almost flashing the entire boulder. You just made one little mistake, right? Like, and it's
V0,
hard.
Tim. It was V0. But it was on my foot. That one's I'm maybe the one I'm most bitter about because I just was all of a sudden on my ass on the ground. I was like, what am I doing
Yeah,
here? Like I already did the boulder. I'm done. I'm up there.
yeah.
But I wasn't. Um, okay, well, what are some of the tactics that you use for flashing, or what do you see people do wrong? Like what causes people I don't know. Yeah, those are the same question, really. Like, what are the most common things you see people do wrong that causes them to fail their flashes or not put their best chance ahead of them?
Yeah, I will try to answer this question, but I think that this kind of may help just talking about the different attributes that I think are required to have a good flash attempt. Because that obviously it comes from thinking deeply about watching a lot of climbers who I know maybe don't embrace the flash concept as to like what's required of you to have a good flash attempt. And then this is kind of what I'm thinking about. But we talked about sequencing a lot and effort and focus, like I said, on a lot of other podcasts, and just kind of tie those into what flashing actually is. But visualization is a big one, man. Like that's probably the biggest one, and that's why it was fun to hear Katie talk about it. And I brought up Jesse Grouper as someone who's like, think about Jesse Grouper is literally sometimes, maybe he won't necessarily be able to tell you what grades that he thinks he's on sighting or like doing in World Cups. But personally, I think he's regularly just walking up 14B, 14C in most World Cup routes and most routes that he's doing. And what's happening is a clear mixture of all these things that I'm talking about. But visualization has got to be one of the biggest things that I see from this guy. Is like he doesn't necessarily look like he's solving through things. We know Jesse as someone who's like seemingly really comfortable being really pumped. Like that's something that's a trademark of his, is he looks like elbows out. Like he just looks kind of tired like a lot of the time that he's climbing, and people who get there tend to have a shorter time bomb before they come off the wall. His time bomb just kind of lasts for a long time, but he's still very decisive, right? There's a difference between being pumped and tired and not being decisive, but he's still decisive. I don't think the decisiveness comes from being on the wall. It comes from being off the wall beforehand, right? That's where the decisiveness comes from, obviously. Not obviously, but now that we're talking about it, seems to be true. And so yeah, not Katie and Jesse and I as well sequence in this way. We sequence falls. Not to say not to say go looking for falls. If you're going to go visualize and sequence, don't go and start looking for where you're going to fall and stuff, but just actually climb when you visualize. You probably will fall then. If you're not feeling the heat, you're not feeling the pump, you're not feeling the energy, you're not feeling the insecurities, then you probably aren't actually climbing the thing, right? Because when's the last time you pulled on something that you're trying to flash that's actually hard and you feel amazing on the entire thing? Like, no, you're kind of aware in the moment. You're like, oh, that was better than I thought or worse than I thought, right? And it's okay to have those encounters when you get there and not let it affect you emotionally, but that's really only going to come from that pre-visualization or an extreme tolerance, right? So it is a little bit of both, practicing those two things. Commitment's a huge one that I see. What I wrote here is 0 false inhibitors. Ideally, you can only see the true optimal path, right? That's the ideal for actually committing to things. If you're not committing to something, likely you have an inhibitor. You have something that's telling you that's not good, that's not the right thing, that's too hard, that's too far, that's too X, Y, and Z. Sometimes those are right and sometimes those are wrong. The point is that you're often wrong and you don't know actually the point, there. And that's coming from somebody who's done a lot of that. And you can ask any really strong climber, anyone at the highest level of climbing is still falling, right? Anyone at the highest level of climbing is still learning and is still solving, right? So it clearly should show you that commitment doesn't have to come from a deep knowing, it has to come from a deep trying, right? And so deep trying has to come from an open mind and asking questions. And the last thing I'll say before I kind of more upfront answer your question is Smart adaptations. Smart adaptations are the micro nuances of climbing. Important to note that this has near infinite variability. So stop saying this is for sure the best way to do this move. For sure. This is the beta, like this is how I'm doing it. You're forgetting about if you're saying that and you really believe that, you're forgetting about the nuance of coordination, timing, and body positioning. Those are infinite variables in climbing. Those are always infinite. They're always going to change from attempt to attempt. You could try the same move with the same beta 100 times in a row, and there will be infinite micro nuances that are changing over and over again. You can be really good at making certain things consistent if you really believe that certain things need to be consistent, but otherwise you should pay attention to attempt to attempt. Attempt to attempt, it's always going to be a little bit different. So you do have, that is a skill. That is an attribute of a good climber is
That's
adaptations, is paying attention to those adaptations, because it's not always going to be one way. But yeah, those are kind of three things that I think are common things that are really important in flashing that you see from really good climbers who do climb really, dude, all World Cup routes in lead are flash attempts. All of them are. All of them are. If you watch,
would you call them on-site? I feel like they're on-sites even. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. Well, all of them are at least flash attempts, and most of them in on-site rounds are on-sites. But in any qualifier, they're all flash attempts. In any on-site, they're all on-site attempts. But basically, my point is they've never been pulled on before. These athletes that you're watching in a stream have never pulled on these things before. So just pay attention to what skills may you be seeing in the high end and the low end.
So I thought it was really interesting what you just said there, where these micro nuances and adjustments that you have to make on every try, whether they're a flash go or a red point go or something you pulled on a bunch, that there's always something a little different, right? Like every single try is different, no matter if you're using the same beta, body position, everything you just mentioned. And so the way I wanted to connect it to flashing, although I guess it applies to red pointing as well, is how do you handle when something goes wrong? Like when you put your foot there and all of a sudden it picks, you didn't come off, but you kind of like had to clench and you just used a bunch of energy. And I know this maybe would show that it's not actually at your limit if you were still able to flash it after that, but just, what do you do when things go wrong or you sequence wrong? Like how do you work through that?
The first thing you do is exhale. The first thing you do is you try to relax, right? If things go wrong, you have to observe the tension that's in your body, right? Check your emotional state. Are you extremely stressed? Because you probably will be. Are you attached to the send? Are you attached to this move feeling good or going right? Okay, clear that part of your mind by taking an exhale, right? If especially if you did do the work visualizing, it starts to get stressful. Well, yeah. So with the assumption that you sequenced, you had plan A, plan B, and plan C, and you went through all three of those, and you still don't, you're still not able to get to the next part, or and this happens quite a bit too, where the hole just feels different or actually is different than you thought it was or what you saw, right? And so those are really common things where it'll totally change your visual, right? Because the answer there is, well, beforehand, hopefully you have enough prep that you can just like easily do the Jesse thing, the quick decisiveness, where he's like looking through all the options and actually knows all those things. But he probably is, a small percentage of the time doing this thing that you're talking about, where he's like, oh, now I have no idea what to do, but what's the next best thing forward? First thing's clear your mind, take a breath, relax. Right after that, you just do the same process that you were supposed to do on the ground with the new information, and you do it quickly, right? If you don't have good training for this, it's not going to end up good. That's a really big, important understanding that we should all have. If you haven't practiced this, if you haven't actually done this, if you haven't done this next part that I was going to say, all of these things, the sequencing, visualization, commitment, smart adaptations, effort, and focus, all of these things can be worked on. And usually immediately after attempts, and they should be worked on immediately after attempts. So big one, don't forget to have an objective assessment of your session on yourself. Like spend an assessment session on yourself right after tries. Just be like, before you like start roasting yourself or making excuses or whatever, like have an objective assessment session on yourself and upvote. Don't judge yourself necessarily. But if you do that over and over and over and over again, well, then the next time this happens, Josh, it'll probably be a bit easier. But let's assume that you spent an entire year doing this and you feel pretty comfortable about, when you start to look at a new scenario and you're like, oh shit, this is like a totally new spot, then it probably will start going better for you. And this is the last step of that. So first step is take a breath out, just relax, like try to cue some muscles to disengage the ones that aren't necessary for you to be in that position. Big one. There are muscles that you're engaging, parts of your hands that you're engaging on positions when you don't know what to do and you need to find a new solution, that you're engaging that don't need to be engaged in that position to stay in that position. Maybe there needs to be engaged to put your foot in a new spot or to adjust another hand. So to only engage it then. That's a really important part of that process. And then start reassessing the new options that you have. And then the last part of that is be open-minded and don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to just like totally mess it up, because you probably, if you couldn't find it on the ground, you probably won't find something that is absolutely certain on the wall, right? You just might have to commit for it. You might have to just absolutely ditch the clean movements. You might have to get it done by any means necessary, which is also something that I learned from Justin Shung, actually, who's the climbing sensei, who's a coach of mine. He really pushed me to invite this third step of, Tim, like, you're really good at this first thing. Like, he kind of told me this at one nationals that I was coaching, because I was like, how would you coach me? And he was like, well, actually, you're really good at this aspect and this aspect and this aspect, but you're not good at this aspect. And the last aspect was get it done by any means necessary. If you can find anything to even, basically for me, I have a threshold of when I believe I can start committing for a move. And that threshold's gotten lower and lower. When, in the beginning, it was like, oh, it needs to be like this good. If it has to feel this good, this foot has to feel this good. It has to be this close. It has to be this controllable. Now it's like down here. If I'm like stuck on a move and I've gone through all the things, and at the point that I'm at now, I'm like, is that foot good enough? Probably. Like, just like go for it and try super, super hard. And it usually works out, right? It usually does work out, because I'm like, and then that also teaches me to increase my threshold by a little bit more at a time, where I'm like, oh, well, if it felt that good and I was that tired, I guess I could do X, Y, and Z option as well.
I want to emphasize that thing you said where you just sometimes need to go for it. And this is not exactly, I mean, this totally ties into flashing, but there's so many times I know people who just, they just want everything to be perfect before they go.
And they never go for it.
Yeah.
Almost ever.
And dude, some of hard climbing, and especially hard flashing, is just freaking going for it. But the nuance there is that when we're saying just go for it, it does not mean just like half-assed lunge and slap the hold or the wall next to the hold. It means actually giving it your best try, where you said, like, is that foothold good enough? I don't know, and you jump for it. But I know that when you say, is this foothold good enough? And then you just jump for it. It may be a terrible foot, but that doesn't mean you didn't try to use every little bit of it. You didn't just kind of paste your foot and like hope. It's like, okay, this is what I have available, and I'm going to commit using it as best as I can.
Remember that mechanics podcast that we had? Or remember when I was talking about like actually seeing how to do a climbing movement? Well, if you're going to step on that foot and pull on this and go to the sideways hold, well, two things matter very much, right? Well, three things matter. How you create, how you maintain the positions, and then how much time you have to stay over certain things, or how much you're allowed to, right? And so if you can create from a lot of different places, right? Creation is really like straightforward thing. It usually momentum first, and then static, creations, whatever. Like, people know how to pull their arms and step on feet and stuff. That's usually not an issue. Most people, some people that I coach, I'm like, look, you're just not creating enough. You're not bouncing up enough. You're not backing up, to do your moves. You're not adding momentum. It's like, great, easy first step, right? The second step is usually mechanics. It's usually just like, well, you're not pulling on the hand you're pulling on for an amount of time that you need to do that for. You're not keeping your foot on for as long as you need to do that move, to get this height, to keep the position, right? And so, yeah, you're right. That is really important at the very end, when you're tired, when you're stressed, your plans don't work, but you have options that clearly can create climbing movements. Think about the mechanics of the move and commit to that. Don't just commit to sticking a hold. Commit to the mechanics, and then try your ass off to hold the position that you're in.
Tim, I don't know if you remember, we did a podcast called Effort, and that's that nuance and effort that I tried to tease out. Is it's so different to say, I'm going to try, and people jump and they kind of slap a hold, and it's like, and they want to be applauded for the attempt. And it's like, no, you weren't trying. You were trying to try. Trying is committing to those mechanics you're talking about.
Exactly.
What's interesting is that, when I've had my best flashes, it's that really embracing of the mechanics and just that full commitment. And I swear to God, sometimes I do better on my flash attempts. I have that full commitment, and I embrace that beta better than when I'm kind of half-assing my later attempts. It's just interest. That's why flashing can be really special and bring out something really special.
And I think that's unique to you. I think that's unique to a small number of climbers who have done a lot of the work to, go on extremes. I've said this so many times in coaching sessions and podcasts and classrooms that we do. Like, climbing is about a balance. Climbing is about a deep balance of, doing climbs really well that you can do, and figuring out what you can do, figuring out what you can do at the extreme end, right? And then meeting in the middle constantly, right? And that's why flashing is so cool, because it actually gives us that opportunity to test if we can do that. And so when you do that, it works out pretty well. And your flash attempts, yeah, I actually have the same sentiment. I feel like my flash attempts are often better than my second, third, fifth, fourth, or fifth try now. It's actually also gotten more like that over time. It used to be that just my second try was worse, and then my third try would be a lot better. Now it's literally my first try will be amazing, and my second to like 10th tries will be worse than my first try a lot of time, because I'm putting so much emphasis and effort into those things. It's harder to do that over time when you're like, now I just don't know. Like, I had really strong opinions about stuff. I'm questioning things on my next tries. Yeah. Anyway, it's super, super interesting.
I like that question. Yeah. You have strong opinions and you commit to, and this is something we've talked about, and you see it in competition climbers. And we heard about when Nathaniel was talking, is that sometimes, especially on first goes, having strong opinions and committing to what may be harder beta is going to cause you to have success. I mean, it kind of is an example of Shawn versus Brian on Spectre. Like, Shawn would not have flashed it using the Brian's way, but yeah. Well, Tim, I have one more thing to add, and I was talking to Carlo, and I was talking to him about this boulder we have nearby us, this couch boulder, and I was complaining about how I fumbled V12 flash on there and got so close and just was really bummed. And V12 was something I would like to flash, and it's tricky because I don't know how many V12s I have in front of me that are my style, and I would be, I don't want to be defeatist, but that would be a pretty limit for me. And Carlo looked at me and was just like, yeah, dude, that thing's probably not V12. And so my advice is just go find something real soft. That's how you flash real hard. There you go. Thanks for bringing me down to earth, Carlo. Really appreciate that.
Nice. He's so real about that stuff too. Like,
he had just no problem just taking my dreams and just stomping on them and just looking me right in the eye as he did it too.
I feel very brutal about this stuff too, because I see the reality in between. Like, if you told me, like, if a kid came to me and they were like, oh my God, Tim, I flashed like Blood Meridian, I'd be like, cool. Like, if somebody came to me and said I flashed Buttermilker, I'd be like, holy shit. Like, are you kidding? Like, that's so insane. Like, there's so much nuance to that boulder. But you see, that's the difference between like what's impressive in climbing. Not to say that Blood Meridian's not hard and impressive. I still haven't done it, but it's just, obviously I don't spend my time on that because there's attributes of climbing that I really care about, really important to me. I wrote this whole spiel that I kind of want to close with, or Josh, you're welcome to add to it or anything, but wrote this whole thing. Flashing can show us a deeper understanding of these attributes of prep and performance, all these things that I was just talking about. If a climber truly knows their physical, technical, and mental potential, it can be kind of enticing to portray those on any given challenge. Climbing gives us a near infinite variation of challenges. So for me personally, I'm interested in my ability to look at a climb, assess it, try and hopefully do it, but reassess and maybe do it. And if that process was repeated 1,000 times and that's what it took to send a climb, that would be the ultimate reward. If I took my flash attempt that seriously, to look at all the sequences and know my visualization and put all the effort and focus into it, and I still didn't do that climb, and then it took me another 1,000 tries to do it, that would be the ultimate challenge. Not necessarily just one that I have to beat my head against and find those things. If I really am challenging myself as a climber, that's what's really important to me. Essentially, without understanding the fundamental significance of what flashing can teach us, we can't truly enjoy this true significance of projecting either. And that's why I beef with this. Like,
whoa, like, that was deep. Can you say that one more time? I kind of like that.
Essentially, without understanding the fundamental significance of what flashing can teach us, we can't truly enjoy the true significance of projecting either. Because like I said, I think projecting really should be this super deep challenge of all the things that and you're constantly doing that flash approach on each little movement, on each little thing. But if you really don't know why even that performance aspect of that flashing is really significant, which is for me really surprising that a lot of high level climbers really don't like this flashing thing, but they'll be impressed if a flash happens. If they do get a flash, they're going to be like, wow, that was awesome. Like, they'll appreciate the performance afterward, but projecting doesn't necessarily highlight the performance aspect because it's so much of it. But it doesn't mean that you can't approach the projecting with the performance mindset and have a better projecting experience.
Well, I think this just goes to show that, you spend a lot of time in the competition scene and it influenced you greatly. And I think it's really cool that we talked about Katie's approach. We talked about the significance of flashing. We talked about moonboarding and all the different ways in which we can express ourselves in climbing. And I think it's just always fun when we dive deep with you, how you just really bring out this concept of mastery. And just I love that when we really went into the significance of flashing, just how you showcased it at this culmination of deep climbing skills into one moment. And I think that, again, you can choose your own adventure, everyone. And I think that just you really, you convinced me. You definitely changed my mind about what flashing really is at its core, which I think is cool, Tim. I thought that was fun. Where
That's awesome.
I mean, it is still just what can you do on your first go, but it also clarified to me like the ethics around it too, and why I actually am now more okay with kind of doing whatever it takes, because otherwise we're talking about an on-site, and an on-site, maybe we'll do a podcast on that someday. But
I have one more thing to close on. Sorry, and this came from a discussion that you and I just had yesterday, and me kind of talking about like the belt that I see you in, and you maybe are a better climber than you're able to represent. I just know this. I'll make a statement. Josh is a much, 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 much better climber than he's able to represent physically. And I wrote this thing about, the previous thing I just said. I said, this is why I like the gym. Because of the strict nature of rock climbing, holds shouldn't be manufactured or moved. And it's also a commonly strong standard in bouldering culture. We don't really manufacture things. It's really, taboo to do that. And that really doesn't happen. And people really are strict about that stuff. We enjoy the deep challenges it can provide for us. However, the beauty of creating movements in a confined space, route setting in a climbing gym, perfect or purposefully imperfect, we can try infinite movements and learn or improve our overall climbing ability far quicker. The climber's brain and movement theory is so interesting to me because of this one statement. Knowing you can find the tools to solve something is far more powerful, consistent, and adaptable of a skill and attribute than proving by resume. Knowing you can find the tools to solve something is a far more powerful, consistent, and adaptable skill or attribute than proving by resume. Proving by resume, however, has important depth beyond my current understanding, and I can't wait to learn that. But I think that we underappreciate what this really deep climber's brain movement theory and knowing you can find the tools to solve something, and that being a powerful skill and attribute, I think that's underrated. And that's something that I think Josh is really good at.
Learn how to learn. And by the way, Tim, that belt that you mentioned at the beginning, that's a big American flag belt buckle. Is that what it is now that I'm in Nevada?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. It's not black belt. It's just or maybe a Confederate flag. Is that what you see me as wearing?
Oh, no.
No. I'm
no Sensei belt. Sensei belt, Josh.
Okay. Well, Tim, thanks. I still want to continue adding to my resume. Whether that's indoors on the moon board or I still got my eyes on Mandala Sit. I don't know. The shoulder injury really put me back, but temps are getting cold. Psych is getting
I'm trying
high.
Sleepwalker tonight.
Oh, you are? Oh,
I'm going to go try Sleepwalker tonight.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I can't wait to hear how that went on the next episode, man. Take care. Do it first try.
Peace. See you guys.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to learn more about Testpiece climbing, you can check us out at testpiececlimbing.com and even book a session with one of our coaches.